Did you know that more than 90% of viewers don't subscribe to our channel? If you're watching this and haven't subscribed yet, please consider hitting that subscribe button. We don't run ads on our videos, so we don't earn anything from them. Every subscription, every like, every comment truly means the world to us. Your support keeps our passion alive and motivates us to create more. We'd also love to hear from you. Tell us where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Let's start our story. Story number 1. Rain had been following Ray Turner for 3 states. It streaked across his windshield in endless silver threads, chased by the sweeping arms of his wipers. The world beyond his headlights was a shifting wall of wet darkness, broken only by the pale lines of the interstate cutting through the hills. The dashboard glowed a soft green. The engine hummed in its steady, comforting way. Inside the cab, Ray was alone with his thoughts and the low murmur of the CB radio. He was 53, with 28 years of long-haul driving behind him. He knew when a road felt wrong. And something about this stretch of the Appalachian Highway had been off since midnight. It started with the mile markers. Ray had passed mile 213 3 times. He noticed the first 2, without thinking much about it, chalking it up to tiredness. Coffee sloshed in a paper cup by his left knee. He wasn't quite due for a break. The GPS on the dash swore he was making steady progress. The odometer agreed. But when the little green reflector with 213 flashed by again, his chest tightened. He checked the clock. 12:47 a.m. The same as last time. He didn't curse or slam the wheel. He just watched the numbers tick on the GPS, watched another half-mile slide beneath his tires, and waited. Mile 214 came and went. He let out a slow breath, shoulders loosening. Just a trick of the mind. Maybe the previous markers had been tagged with graffiti, or the reflective strip had bounced his light in a familiar way. He took another sip of coffee and shook off the fog. On the passenger seat, his old CB microphone sat in its cradle. The channel was quiet. Most drivers were likely hunkered down somewhere, waiting out the weather. Ray didn't mind the rain. As long as it wasn't ice, he was fine. The first whisper came around mile 219. A soft crackle broke the silence, like someone brushing a hand across the speaker. Ray's eyes flicked to the radio. The channel light was steady. No one transmitting. Then a faint sound pushed through the static, fragile and thin. "Hello?" Ray frowned. He picked up the mic, thumb resting on the button but not pressing it. Another breath of static. Another tiny voice. Clearer this time. "Can anyone hear me?" It sounded young. Maybe a teenager. Maybe even younger. The tone was small and scared, catching in the middle like someone was trying not to cry. Ray pressed the button. "Breaker 1 to 9. This is Night Sparrow. You're coming in weak." "Say again?" Nothing. The static faded back to silence. Only the hum of the engine and the rain remained. He waited 30 seconds, then a full minute. No response. "Probably some kid messing around with a cheap handheld," he muttered, setting the mic back down. "Maybe a trucker's family playing in the cab while the rig was parked." It happened. Another 6 miles slipped away. The road rose into low, dark hills, trees pressing close on either side. The rain softened to a mist. The world felt muffled, wrapped in cotton. Far ahead, a green sign rose out of the gloom. "Rest area, 1 mile. No services. Closed." Ray squinted. He'd run this route a half-dozen times that year and couldn't remember ever seeing that sign. Maybe it had reopened and closed again. Rest areas changed hands, went into repair, fell apart. "Figures," he said, eyeing the clock. 1:03 a.m. He could have used a bathroom and a better cup of coffee. The CB crackled again. "Please, someone, answer." The voice was clearer now and trembling. Not a prank. Not a bored teen. It carried a weight that made Ray's fingers tighten on the wheel. He snatched up the mic. "Night Sparrow here. You're coming through, kid. Where you at?" This time there was no delay. "The rest stop," the voice said. "The one that's closed. I think I'm not supposed to be here." A chill crawled across Ray's arms, raising the hairs under his flannel. He eased off the accelerator, eyes scanning the right shoulder for the upcoming ramp. "Copy that. I'm about a half mile out from a closed rest area now." "What's your name, kid?" Silence. Come again? What's your handle? More static, like wind blowing through leaves. Then, very softly, I don't remember. The sign for the ramp appeared on the right, headlights painting its reflective face. Rest area. Closed. No truck parking. Beyond it, the faint outline of a ramp curled away into the trees, the pavement glistening with rain. Every sensible part of Ray knew he should keep driving. The place was closed. The kid had to be somewhere else, mistaken. And yet the clock on his dash read 1:03 a.m. Exactly. No seconds. No shift. He flicked on his turn signal and guided the rig toward the ramp. Copy, kid. I'm pulling in now. You'll see a blue Kenworth with a silver trailer. You inside the building? A long, thin breath filtered through the speaker. Please, hurry. The ramp rose gently, the highway slipping away behind him. Trees crowded closer, as if leaning in to listen. The rain had turned to a misty drizzle that beaded on the windshield in tiny halos. The rest area appeared around a slow curve. It was small, older than most Ray had seen. A squat brick building with boarded-up windows sat at the center, its roofline sagging. The parking lot was cracked and webbed with weeds. Faded white lines showed long-vanished parking spaces. A pair of yellow barricades sat askew near the entrance, one pushed aside. There were no lights. Yet as his high beams swept the scene, something glimmered. A faint glow, not bright enough to be a working lamp, seemed to cling to the building's doorway and the old picnic tables beyond. Ray rolled into the lot at a crawl, every instinct on high alert. He set the brakes, the air hiss echoing off the deserted structure, and killed the engine. The sudden quiet rang in his ears. The CB hissed softly. "Where are you?" the small voice asked. Ray left the headlights on, turning the parking lot into a pale island in the dark. He hesitated before reaching for his flashlight. It was an old habit to take it whenever he stepped out at night, even at busy truck stops. This time, it felt like a lifeline. "I'm in the lot," he said into the mic, trying to keep his voice level. "Stay where you are. I'll come to you." He stepped down from the cab, boots splashing in shallow puddles. The air was cooler here, with a damp, mossy smell. Crickets chirped faintly in the trees, but there was no distant highway roar, even though the interstate lay only a ramp away. He clicked on the flashlight. The beam cut across the cracked asphalt, picked out tufts of grass pushing through the seams. It glided over a rusted trash can, a splintered bench, the dark mouth of a path leading into the woods. "Kid?" Ray called, his breath clouding faintly. "You in the building?" No answer. The CB sat on the passenger seat, his door hanging open. The interior light a warm square behind him. The truck looked comforting, solid, and safe. A part of him wanted to climb back in, shut the door, and roll on. Instead, he walked toward the building. Up close, it was even more rundown. The boards over the windows were gray and warped, nails rusted. The door was chained shut, the padlock orange with age. A small sign hung crookedly nearby, its lettering almost completely faded. The flashlight caught a few remaining words. "Closed after incident. No public access." Ray's throat tightened. He reached out and touched the cold metal of the chain, feeling a smear of damp rust on his fingertips. The CB crackled from the truck behind him, louder now in the silence. "See you," the voice whispered. "By the door." Ray turned slowly, flashlight swinging. The beam washed over the parking lot, over his idling truck, over the empty space between. No one stood there. No cars. No flicker of movement. "Where?" he asked, voice lower. "I don't see you, kid." A soft, shaky breath. Then, "You're not supposed to be here." The temperature seemed to drop another degree. Ray swallowed, eyes scanning the tree line. Every shadow looked deeper than it should be. "You called for help," he said. "You said you were at the rest stop. I'm here." Silence stretched, thin and fragile. Wind stirred the leaves overhead with a sound like careful footsteps. "I called," the voice said at last. It sounded a little older now. Still young, but changed. As if years had passed in a single pause. But not tonight. The flashlight flickered. Ray smacked it lightly with his palm, his heartbeat ticking faster. The beam steadied, though it felt weaker. What do you mean, not tonight? The answer came slowly, like someone groping through a fog of memory. It happened, a long time ago. I was here. It was raining. And a trucker said he was coming. He said, "Stay put." He never made it. Ray looked back to the interstate ramp. The highway beyond was invisible, swallowed by trees and mist. No headlights cut the darkness. No distant engine noise drifted over. What happened to him, Ray asked. For him, it was just another night, the voice said. For me, it was the last one. He never got here. Not in time. Ray took a step back from the door without meaning to. The breeze shifted, bringing a faint scent he couldn't place. Not rot, not anything sharp, just old wet concrete and something like extinguished candles. Then why am I here? Ray asked, more to himself than to the radio. The CB didn't answer. He stood there, truck idling behind him, rest area sagging with age in front of him, caught between the familiar and the strange. His watch ticked audibly on his wrist. He glanced at it. 1:03 a.m. He checked the dash clock through the windshield. 1:03 a.m. The digital numbers glowed steady, unblinking. He had been at the ramp around 1:03. He had parked. He had walked. Time should have moved. It had not. The air felt thicker now, slow and heavy. Ray backed away from the chain door, flashlight drifting to the side of the building. There, half hidden in weeds, stood an old payphone. Its metal body was streaked with rust, the plastic cover over the buttons cloudy with age. The receiver hung from its cord, swaying gently though there was no wind strong enough to move it. A thin drip of water fell steadily from the corner of the phone's hood, pattering onto the concrete below. As Ray's light touched it, the CB flared again. "That's where I called," the voice said, almost reverent. "I was supposed to meet my ride. They were late. It got dark. I used the phone. The line. It was hard to hear. I kept saying hello. I thought someone picked up. A man. He said he was on his way." Ray approached the payphone slowly, each step sounding too loud in his ears. He reached out and touched the receiver. It was cold, colder than the air, as if it had been left in a freezer. "You waited," Ray murmured. "Who were you?" He didn't expect an answer. But one came, very soft. Jamie. The name shivered in the air, small and human, and terribly real. "I'm sorry, Jamie," Ray said. "I'm just a driver. I don't know why I got your call tonight." The radio hissed. The voice sounded closer now, like it was just behind his shoulder. "Because it keeps happening," Jamie said. "Sometimes when it rains, the call goes out. To someone on the road. Someone who might make it this time." Ray closed his eyes for a moment. He pictured a kid standing under this phone, backpack slung over one shoulder, rain soaking the pavement. A driver somewhere out on the interstate, promising to stop. A missed exit, a wrong turn, a delay that stretched just long enough. Did someone... He stopped himself. He didn't want the answer in detail. "What happened after you called?" "I waited," Jamie said simply. "The rain got worse. A car pulled in. Not the right car. I got in anyway. I didn't know. By the time I did, it was too late." Ray felt the world narrow to the sound of that voice and the cold, dangling receiver in his hand. He hung it gently back on its hook. "You got in the wrong car," he said. And now the call just echoes. Yes, the word was barely a breath. Ray opened his eyes and looked back at his truck. The cab light still shone, a warm square in the night. The sight grounded him. "Jamie," he said carefully, "if this keeps happening, if drivers keep hearing you, does anything change?" There was a pause. Then, "Sometimes they pass by," Jamie said. "Sometimes they stop at the wrong place. You're the first one who found this rest stop when it's like this." "Like this?" "Between," Jamie whispered. "Not the way it is now. Not the way it was. In between." Ray looked around. The rest area shimmered faintly at the edges of his vision, like heat haze over pavement. For a moment, he saw the building without boards, lights glowing in the windows, cars lined up in the lot, a vending machine humming, a child's laugh. Then it was gone again. "Can you leave?" he asked. "If someone actually comes?" The answer came so quickly it hurt. "I don't know." Ray stood in the mist, feeling the weight of the miles behind him and the miles ahead. He thought of all the times he'd been late, all the times a customer had complained because he was an hour off schedule. How small that sounded next to this. "Maybe we should try," he said. He walked back to the truck, boots echoing dully. As he climbed into the cab, the air inside felt warmer, cleaner. He shut the door, and the outside world became a muted shape. He picked up the mic. "Jamie," he said, eyes on the dark rest area. "Get ready. When I pull out, you see those headlights? You head toward them. Don't get in any other car. Don't let anyone else talk you into anything. Just get to the light. Okay?" The static shuddered softly. "I'm scared," Jamie said. "I know," Ray replied, "but I'm here now." He wasn't sure that was true, not in the way the kid meant it. But it felt like the only thing that mattered. He eased the truck into gear. The rest area's cracked asphalt rolled slowly under his tires as he made a wide circle, pointing the rig back toward the ramp. His headlights swept over the building, the payphone, the picnic tables. For a brief second, the beams caught a small figure standing by the phone. A kid, maybe 12 or 13, in an oversized hoodie, hair plastered to their forehead. The figure was partly transparent, like a reflection in a window at night, but the eyes were clear, wide, and uncertain. Then the angle changed, and the figure slid out of the light. Ray didn't stop. He kept rolling, heart pounding, watching the ramp approach. "Now, Jamie," he said into the mic. "Come on." The ramp stretched out in front of him, curving down toward the invisible highway. The trees on either side blurred into dark tunnels. The rain had almost stopped, leaving the road slick and reflective. As he reached the midpoint of the ramp, the CB flared bright and loud, as if someone had turned up the volume. "I see you," Jamie's voice cried, closer than ever. "I see the lights." Ray swallowed, throat tight. "Keep coming." The ramp leveled out, and the highway opened ahead. Twin rivers of faint, empty lanes. No other vehicles in sight. No other lights. The receiver crackled once more. "Thank you," Jamie whispered. The word was filled with something fragile, hope, maybe, or relief. Then the CB went dead. Not even static. Just a soft, complete silence. Ray merged onto the interstate, the tires hissing on wet asphalt. The GPS ticked up a mile. The odometer advanced. The clock changed. 1:04 a.m. The road felt different now. Lighter. The air in the cab seemed easier to breathe. He drove another mile, then 2. The rain began again, but only in gentle sheets. The trees thinned, and distant truck lights appeared, winking like a constellation on the horizon. Ray reached for the CB, half expecting Jamie's voice to return. It didn't. Instead, a gruff, familiar tone broke the quiet. "Night Sparrow, that you out there on 79? Thought you were gonna beat this mess," another driver said. Ray blinked. "Who's this?" "Rusty Nails," the man replied. "Been trying to catch up to you for the last half hour. You ghosting me or what?" Ray stared at the mic. Half an hour. His eyes darted to the clock. 1:34 a.m. His hands had not left the wheel. The highway stretched behind him, empty and dark. No memory of those 30 missing minutes stirred in his mind. "You still there? Sparrow?" Ray cleared his throat. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I'm here." "Sound like you seen a ghost, man," Rusty chuckled. Ray didn't answer that. He glanced once in the side mirror. Far behind, where the ramp should have been, he saw a faint cluster of lights. For a second, they looked like cars in a rest area. Then they blurred, dimmed, and faded away, leaving only the soft glow of distant trucks. He drove on. At the next open, modern rest stop, bright with vending machines and families and polished floors, Ray parked and stepped out into the night. The air smelled of diesel and fresh coffee. The building hummed with quiet life. Near the entrance, mounted to a brick column, an old, unused payphone hung against the wall. No receiver, no cord. Just an empty metal shell, waiting. Ray paused, hand brushing the cool surface. He thought of a rain-soaked kid, and a chain on a door, and a voice carried through static across years. On his way back to the truck, He flipped on the CB again, more out of habit than hope. Nothing strange came through, just the ordinary chatter of the road, weather reports, jokes, complaints about dispatch. Still, as the miles unspooled and the sky paled with the first hint of dawn, Ray kept glancing at the clock. It ticked forward normally now, minute by minute, never sticking, never stuttering. Somewhere behind him, down a quiet ramp to a place between then and now, a call finally met an answer. And the highway, calm and indifferent, carried him on. Story number 2. The night had a way of flattening the world out on Highway 54. Fields spread in every direction, empty and broad, their dark surfaces barely rising and falling beneath the sky. There were no mountains to catch the moon, no city lights painting the undersides of clouds. Just an enormous, quiet plain, cut by 2 silver ribbons of asphalt and the faint orange glow of distant farmhouses. Elena Ruiz liked it that way. She was in her late 30s, tall, with dark hair pulled into a loose bun at the nape of her neck. Her hands were steady on the wheel, nails short, knuckles relaxed. She had been driving long haul for almost 10 years, enough time to know every kind of highway mood. Busy urban loops that never slept. Sharp mountain passes where the air felt thin and nervous. Desert stretches that shimmered in the heat like dreams. This part of Kansas was one of her favorites, even at 1 in the morning. Her truck, an aging but reliable red Freightliner, hummed along. At 65, the trailer behind her filled with sealed pallets of office supplies. A small blue dinosaur keychain swung from the ignition, ticking gently against the steering column with every bump. The dashboard glowed soft amber, gauges steady, cruise control set. The only light ahead came from her own beams washing over reflective lane markers, and from the occasional overhead sign hanging above the highway. Most of those were blank tonight, their digital panels unlit, hovering in the dark like empty picture frames. Her phone rested in its mount, screen dark. The radio played low instrumental music, some playlist she'd found that promised night driving and quiet thoughts. It blended with the sound of the tires on the pavement and the distant whoosh of the passing wind. She checked her mirrors. The road behind her was as empty as the one ahead. It was the kind of solitude that could feel either peaceful or a little too deep, depending on how much sleep was behind you. Elena had napped at a truck stop a few hours earlier, but the afternoon had been long, and her eyelids itched faintly. She took a sip from her coffee thermos, lukewarm now, but still bitter enough to do something, and rolled her shoulders. Up ahead, a faint rectangle appeared in the distance, high above the road, a variable message sign. As she drew closer, amber letters began to form on its dark surface. Fog ahead. Reduce speed. Elena squinted through the windshield. The air in front of her looked clear. Stars showed bright, undisturbed by any visible haze. Someone's jumpy, she murmured, glancing at her outside temperature gauge. The numbers glowed. 39 degrees Fahrenheit. Cool. Not freezing. Still, there was no harm in caution. She tapped the cruise control down, watching her speed slip to 60. The hum of the engine softened. For half a mile, the air remained perfectly transparent. Then, with surprising suddenness, a thin sheet of pale gray rolled across the road, as if someone had drawn a semi-transparent curtain between her and the horizon. It wasn't thick, but it was enough to diffuse the light from her headlights, softening edges and hiding details beyond a couple 100 feet. As she eased a bit more off the accelerator, something moved on the right shoulder. A deer stepped out of the fog, its coat dark and sleek, eyes shining in the beams. Its hooves clicked on the pavement as it crossed in front of her at a slow, unhurried pace, unaware or unconcerned. She had enough distance to brake smoothly, to give it room without panic. The truck slowed, engine brake rumbling gently. The deer reached the left shoulder and disappeared into the field. Her heart thumped once, hard, then settled. Okay, she breathed, a small chill walking up her arms. You win that one. By the time the fog thinned and vanished, the last trace of adrenaline had faded into a curious unease. She couldn't remember seeing any alerts about fog in the weather report. And out here, she knew the signs weren't always accurate, but they usually didn't warn about nothing. She reset the cruise at 65 and watched the empty road. Another mile. Then 2. The planes rolled on. The next overhead gantry appeared slowly, black against the sky, its panel dark until she was nearly beneath it. Then, with no transition, words bloomed into existence. "Keep left, Elena." Her hands tightened around the steering wheel. For a moment, she thought she'd misread it. Long nights could do that, turning random clusters of lights into familiar shapes, like faces in the patterns of a curtain. But as her truck passed under, the letters shone clear and steady. "Keep left, Elena." Her name, bright as anything. She checked the other lane out of instinct. The right lane was open. The left lane she currently occupied was open. No cones, no flashing arrows. Her GPS screen showed a straight, uneventful stretch for the next 20 miles. Elena glanced in her mirrors, half expecting to see another rig just behind her. Some prankster with a programmable sign attached to a trailer. But there was nothing. Just her own taillights shrinking into the distance. She let her breath out through her nose, slowly. "Someone had fun with the system," she said out loud, as if saying it could make it true. Maybe some technician had plugged in a test message and accidentally left it looping. Maybe it was a coincidence that it matched her name. Elena wasn't that uncommon. Still, the sound of it on a public sign, hovering in the night like a personal whisper, left a faint tightness in her chest. She stayed in the left lane. 2 minutes later, lights appeared in her side mirror. A pair of high beams, approaching fast in the right lane. She checked her speed, still 65, and flicked on her right blinker to let them know she wasn't moving over. The vehicle roared past, a dark pickup truck with a dented tailgate, weaving slightly as it went. As it pulled ahead, the driver drifted onto the shoulder, corrected too sharply, then swerved back into the lane. The truck fishtailed once, twice, tires squealing faintly even through her closed windows. Elena instinctively eased off the accelerator to give them more space. Seconds later, the pickup crossed back in front of her, half in the right lane, half in the left, then continued on in a jagged line, its brake lights flashing erratically. "Someone's had a long night," she muttered, watching the swaying taillights grow smaller. If she had moved right when she'd planned, their paths would have met differently. Maybe it still would have been fine. Maybe not. The thought sat with her as the overhead gantry disappeared into the darkness behind. She drove, and the planes unrolled. An hour slid by. The world became a tunnel of dim orange markers and soft music. The side of the road rose here and there, where shallow drainage ditches cut through the fields. Once, she passed a lone farmhouse with a porch light on, glowing like a small star. Then, ahead, another board waited above the road. She watched it from a distance, jaw set. This one flickered to life while she was still a quarter mile away. The amber characters came in slowly, one after another, almost hesitantly. "Do not exit at 47. Elena glanced at her GPS. The small voice icon in the corner remained silent, but the screen showed her destination. A distribution center on the edge of a mid-sized town, 37 miles ahead. The quickest route, highlighted in blue, took her off as she zoomed in exit 47. She frowned. The warning could have been routine, she told herself. Maybe there was construction. Maybe the ramp was closed. Or there was some local issue the state wanted drivers to avoid. It wasn't unusual to see ramp closed or use alt route messages. But this was different. No explanation. Just a quiet insistence. Do not exit at 47. The sign passed overhead with a mild hum. In her mirror, the text glowed for a moment longer, then winked out. Elena pursed her lips. Her fuel gauge hovered just under half. Plenty to pass exit 47 and take the next one, then circle back on a county road if she had to. It would cost her maybe 10 extra minutes. Dispatch wouldn't be thrilled, but she had a small cushion in her hours of service log tonight. Still, the route had been planned carefully. The GPS had not mentioned closures. Her dispatcher, Pete, always checked twice before sending her down a less traveled path. If something was off, he would have told her. She reached out and tapped the screen. The route ahead remained unchanged. No detours, no alerts. "Come on," she said quietly, half to the device, half to the road itself. "What's the game here?" Silence. Exit 43 slid by, its ramp empty, its gas station sign dark in the distance. Wind tugged lightly at the sides of her trailer. A herd of cattle clustered near a fence, their dark shapes indistinct in the night. By the time the mile marker for 45 appeared, Elena's mind felt split. One part ran through practical calculations. Time. fuel, schedules. Another part recalled the deer stepping from the fog, the weaving pickup, the way the sign had known her name. She brought her hand to the CB mic, thought about calling out to see if any other drivers had seen odd messages, then decided against it. The radio had been quiet most of the night. The last thing she wanted was to sound like she was seeing things. The green sign for exit 47 rose ahead, white numbers clean in her headlights. 47. Hawthorne. Services 1 mile. Her GPS chimed, voice smooth and neutral. In 1 mile, take exit 47. The overhead gantry just before the ramp was dark. No glowing letters. No warnings. Elena's palms felt faintly damp. She signaled right, moved into the exit lane, and watched the dashed white lines drift under her. Nothing about the ramp looked unusual. It curved gently, guardrails on either side, weeded gravel beyond. Maybe it really had been nothing. A test, a glitch, a coincidence. She was halfway down when the world didn't exactly change, but thinned. The sound of her engine, the hum of the tires, the faint rattle of something in the sleeper, everything seemed to draw one step farther away, as if heard through a slightly closed door. The cab light above her head flickered once, though it was off. Her headlights washed over a new sign at the bottom of the ramp, one that hadn't been on her GPS map. Road closed. Local traffic only. Cone barricades stood across the lane beyond, but they were wrong. The reflective strips on them didn't catch her lights. The orange plastic looked flat, grayish. A faint strip of brush grew up through the asphalt in a jagged line where the ramp met the crossroad. Elena slowed to a stop a few truck lengths away, engine idling. A second sign leaned in the ditch to her right, half obscured by long grass. Exit 47 permanently closed. Use alt route. The arrows on it pointed back to the highway she'd come from. Her heart tapped once, then began to move faster. In 300 feet, the GPS said calmly, turn right. Elena muted it with a jab of her thumb. She sat there, breathing, listening to the soft tick of cooling metal. The ramp looked unused, its surface lightly filmed with dust. No fresh tire marks, no glint of recent paint. The crossroad beyond was entirely dark. No farmhouse porch lights. No glow from town. Just a shadowy ribbon, vanishing into fields. She thought of the sign's words again, glowing against the sky. Do not exit at 47. The unease that had been simmering all night flared into something sharper. Very carefully, she nudged the truck into reverse, checked her mirrors twice, and backed up the ramp. It took longer than she liked. Backing a trailer uphill on a curve was never fun. But she managed it, easing back onto the highway shoulder with headlights still pointed forward, engine rumbling a little louder with the effort. For a moment, she sat there in the merge lane, hazard lights flashing, heart pounding in her chest. No vehicles appeared ahead or behind. It was as if the entire highway had stepped aside to give her room. Then she merged back onto the interstate, leaving exit 47 and its strange, unused ramp behind. The next open exit was 51. She took it. The ramp there was lit and smooth, newly repaved. A gas station waited at the bottom, its bright canopy a relief after the blank fields. She pulled in, fueled up, used the restroom, and splashed cool water on her face at the sink. Inside the station, a lone clerk scanned items behind the counter. A TV behind him murmured with late-night news. A rack of keychains glittered by the door. When she came up to pay for a bottle of iced tea, the clerk glanced at her hat with the small trucking company logo embroidered on it. Long night? He asked, ringing up her purchase. Something like that, she said. Hey, do you know if there's really an exit 47 back up the road? My GPS had me get off there, but it looked closed. He paused, fingers hovering over the register. 47? He repeated slowly. No. They decommissioned that 1 year ago. There was a bad accident at the intersection. Took them a long time to figure out how to reroute things safely. Last I heard, they tore up most of the road connecting to it. Elena felt a small coldness settle under her ribs. It's still on the signs, she said, and on the GPS. Government's slow to change the big ones, he shrugged. And those GPS maps? Sometimes they don't catch up. But nobody uses that ramp anymore. You sure you saw it? She could still feel the rumble under her feet as she'd backed up it. the way the sound of the truck had gone distant for a moment. "I'm sure," she said quietly. He studied her a moment longer, then gave a small nod, as if deciding not to ask more. "Be careful out there," he said, handing her the receipt. Back in the truck, parked under the soft station lights, Elena sat for a few minutes longer than usual. She checked her dash cam, scrolling back through the footage around the time she'd approached the sign that had used her name. On the small screen, the highway unfolded in ghostly monotone. The first sign appeared, "Fog ahead," divided by red juice, speed letters blazing. The second gantry came into view. "Keep left. SCVR, lane closed." The text was different. No name, just a generic, slightly garbled warning. She scrolled further, to the message about exit 47. "Do not exit at," she whispered as the gantry drew near. On the video, the sign stayed dark. Her truck rolled under a blank panel and kept going. Elena sat back, heart thudding now in a slower, heavier rhythm. She turned the screen off. For a while, she considered calling Pete, telling him she'd had to reroute because the ramp was unusable. The words felt thin before she even formed them. What would she say if he asked for specifics? I listened to a warning that wasn't there. Instead, she made a brief note in her physical log. Something about, took 51 due to closure at 47, and pulled back onto the road. The plains had grown colder while she'd been inside. A faint shimmer hovered above the asphalt. Not quite fog, not quite mist, just a softness around the edges of the world. Up ahead, beyond the reach of her headlights, another overhead gantry waited. Her throat tightened. This one came to life only as her truck passed beneath it, letters flaring briefly above her, too quick to read. But she felt something then, a sensation like someone looking down from a bridge as she passed below. Not hostile, not friendly, just aware. She drove. The miles ticked past. Town lights shimmered on the horizon, then fell behind. Her eyelids felt a little heavier. The playlist shifted to quieter piano tracks, almost lullabies. Near mile marker 62, the air thickened again. Not fog this time, but a subtle pressure, like the beginning of a storm, without the wind or thunder. Her ears popped gently. The sign above the next stretch of road didn't wait for her to see it. It formed in her mind first, like words in a dream. Slow down now. Her foot slid to the brake before she even fully realized why. The cruise control clicked off. The engine brake growled softly. Her headlights found nothing unusual. No deer, no weaving pickup, no stalled car. The asphalt gleamed, black and empty. Then, 200 feet ahead, the faintest dark shimmer crossed the road, like a shadow without a source. A strip maybe 3 car lengths wide. Her tires hit it, and the steering wheel twitched in her hands. Ice. Invisible, thin, perfectly clear ice. Just enough to steal traction from anyone going too fast. The truck slid half a foot sideways. Elena's muscles responded before her conscious mind did, easing off, no sudden moves. The rig straightened, caught dry pavement again, and continued. Her heart raced. She looked up. The overhead sign ahead was alive with text. Good. The word glowed for a second, then dissolved. Elena drove the remaining portion of the night with the radio off. Nothing else overtly strange happened. The sky shifted from black to deep blue. The outlines of trees, houses, and billboards emerged from the dark. Other vehicles appeared, their drivers still wrapped in their own private bubbles of fatigue and thought. She delivered her load just after sunrise. The distribution center workers checked her in with half-awake nods. Paperwork rustled. Forklifts beeped. Concrete echoed with the usual sounds. No one there knew how close she had come to a ramp that didn't want her, or a glazed patch of road that could have become a slow-motion disaster. Weeks passed. Other routes, other highways. Snow in Colorado, heat shimmer in Texas, rain tight as curtains in Tennessee. The memory of that night on 54 softened around the edges, like a photograph left in the Sunday. But it did not fade. Whenever she saw a blank gantry, she glanced up at it a moment longer than necessary. Whenever the GPS suggested an exit that felt a little too quiet, she checked it against her own instincts, not just the screen. One spring evening, heading east through another long, lonely stretch, different road, different state, Elena saw an overhead sign light up ahead of her. She tensed. It was a simple message this time. Rest area 2 miles. Truck parking available. Normal. Boring. She exhaled, feeling foolish. But as she passed beneath, the letters shifted once, just for a heartbeat, like a person leaning close to murmur something no one else could hear. Good to see you, Elena. By the time she twisted around to look in her mirror, the sign read only the usual words again, bright and official. Rest area 2 miles. Truck parking available. She pulled in when she reached it, parked between 2 other rigs, and sat for a long moment with her hands resting quietly on the wheel. Out beyond the parking lot, the highway rolled on, carrying its unending procession of headlights and taillights. Somewhere above it, metal frames and dark panels waited, ready to flicker to life. Sometimes for weather, sometimes for accidents, and sometimes, maybe, for one driver at one particular moment, when something on the road or in it chose not to let her pass into the kind of silence that never ended. Elena shut off the engine. The truck clicked softly as it cooled, like a big animal settling into sleep. In the quiet that followed, no voices spoke, no signs glowed. The night was just night again. But as she closed her eyes in the sleeper, the memory of amber letters hung behind her eyelids, forming and reforming in the darkness, patient and watchful. Story number 3. Most people think the loneliest part of a long-haul run is the empty road in front of them. For Dana Keene, it was the rearview mirror. Her truck wasn't new, but it was hers cream-colored Kenworth, chrome a little dulled by years of weather, dash worn smooth where her fingers had tapped through traffic jams and weighing station lines. She liked the weight of it under her, the way the steering wheel seemed to settle into her hands like something that remembered her grip. She ran nights more often than not. Fewer cars, fewer headaches, more miles. The quiet suited her. She knew how to keep herself awake. Coffee, playlists, the occasional phone call to a friend in another time zone. Tonight, though, the quiet felt different. The run was simple on paper. Nevada to Colorado, reefer trailer loaded with frozen produce. All interstate except for a stretch of 2-lane crossing a low mountain range. She'd done it 3 times that year. The dispatcher barely had to finish the sentence before she said yes. She'd left a bright little truck stop outside Elko just after sunset. Tank topped off. A plastic container of microwave lasagna warming her belly. Somewhere between the fuel island and the on-ramp, an older driver had stopped her with a half smile and a question. "You night runner or just stuck with the bad shift?" he'd asked, leaning against his blue Peterbilt, cigarette unlit in his hand more out of habit than intent. "Night runner by choice," Dana had answered, adjusting her cap. "Less circus." He'd nodded, approving. "Good, then you probably already know the rules." She'd laughed. "What rules?" "Coffee after midnight," he'd said, counting on his fingers. "No greasy burgers before a steep grade. And don't stare too long into your mirrors when the road's empty." That last one gave her a small pause. "Because," she'd prompted, expecting a joke. He'd studied her for a moment, deciding, then shrugged, as if it didn't quite matter whether she believed him. "Out there, after a certain hour, when the traffic dies, sometimes you're not the only one using your mirrors," he said. "You'll think you see a car behind you that isn't there, or a person. Old-timers call him the rider. Shows up in the convex mirror first. If you keep looking, he gets clearer." Dana had raised an eyebrow. "A ghost story," she said lightly. "Maybe," the man had replied. "Or maybe it's just how tired eyes work. Either way, here's the important part. If you ever see him, if you ever think you see someone sitting back there in your sleeper, when you look at that mirror, you don't adjust anything. Hands on the wheel, eyes forward. Let him ride behind the glass. Don't invite him in. And you know all this because..." He'd smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Because one night I forgot the rule," he said. "And I've never seen my own face as clearly in a mirror since." The word stuck with her more than she'd expected. Even now, hours later, with the truck rolling steadily east under a bowl of stars, they clung to the edges of her thoughts like cobwebs. The highway lamps had disappeared miles ago. The world beyond her beams was all dark shapes and silhouettes. Scrub, low hills, the suggestion of distant ridges. The sky was cloudless. A gibbous moon hung low off to the south, its light paling the nearest stars. Inside the cab, everything felt familiar. The faint vibration of the engine through the floorboard. The swish of the wipers now and then, as she cleared off bug streaks. The ribbon of instrumental guitar she'd put on to keep her company. In the top corner of the windshield, her dashcam's tiny blue light blinked, recording. To her left, the driver's side mirror showed the faint silver thread of the trailer's side. To her right, the longer mirror did the same, its smaller convex spot mirror below it capturing a wider curved slice of reality, the shoulder, the lane, the dark interior of her sleeper behind, like a small window into the space just over her shoulder. She didn't usually think about that last part. Tonight, she did. The road behind her had been empty for almost 20 minutes. No pairs of headlights cresting the low hills, no glows of cities, nothing. Just the endless black line. Her phone, mounted on the dash, sat dark. No signal bars, just the occasional brief flicker before they vanished again. She took a sip from her travel mug, wincing at the taste. The coffee had gone from strong to burnt hours ago. Somewhere between one song and the next, she glanced into the passenger side mirror. The big rectangle reflected exactly what it should. The white flank of her trailer stretching back, small specks of light from her marker lamps along the top edge, the faint stripe of the lane line. Below it, in the convex oval, the image ballooned and curved. She saw the road falling away behind her, shrinking into the center of the convex glass. The asphalt was 2 shades of gray, lit by her own illumination. On either side, the shoulder blurred into shadow, and in the center of that little world in a circle, for just a half second, she thought she saw a shape where no shape should be. A deeper darkness. The faint outline of someone sitting on the edge of her bunk, just behind the curtain, legs slightly apart, elbows on knees, looking forward, looking at the back of her seat. She blinked. The mirror showed only the sleeper's dark doorway now, a patch of black within the reflected glow of her dashboard lights. The curtain was pushed halfway open the way she'd left it, giving her peripheral vision a little more depth, helping her not feel boxed in. Her skin prickled along her arms. "Tired," she said, softly enough that her voice barely made a sound. "That's all." She kept her hands steady on the wheel and forced herself not to lean closer to the glass, not to squint, not to try and reclaim what she thought she'd seen. Miles ticked by on the odometer. The highway rose gently, dipping and rising like the back of some sleeping animal. A small green sign flashed past. Summit Ridge, elevation 6,112. Next service is 48 miles. She put a little more attention into her driving, feeling the faint strain as the truck climbed. The reefer unit's steady hum behind her was a comfort, a reminder of its load quietly chilling away. The music track ended. The next took a moment to start. The space in between stretched just a fraction too long. In that thin pocket of silence, the cab creaked. Dana knew that noise. Temperature changes, pressure shifts, the way the frame of the truck flexed when the road tilted. It didn't usually bother her. Tonight, it sounded like weight shifting. Her eyes flicked, just once, to the convex mirror. Something sat in the sleeper. It was more obvious now. A silhouette cut from the darkness, head bowed slightly, shoulders rounded, hands clasped loosely between the knees. No features, just a human outline, as if someone had taken the idea of a person and drawn it in ink where there should have been empty air. Her heart leapt into her throat. She snapped her gaze back to the windshield. "Don't adjust anything," she heard the older driver say in her memory. Hands on the wheel, eyes forward. Her fingers dug a little tighter into the leather. She could feel the urge rising in her like a physical itch to look again, to make sure, to disprove her own fear. 1,000 small rationalizations lined up, their voices reasonable and calm. It's just a trick of reflections. The curtain, the back wall, your jacket hanging on the hook. Check, verify. You're a professional, not a little kid afraid of the dark. The truck's headlights washed over a metal signpost ahead, making it glow briefly. Check brakes. 6% grade ahead. Next 5 miles. She took a slow breath in, then out, regulating herself. One thing at a time. First the hill, then the ghosts. Her foot moved to the pedal controls with practiced ease. She downshifted, feeling the engine change tone as it caught a lower gear. The truck responded. The strain of the grade settling into a steady, controlled pull. The mountain road curved left, then right. Guardrails appeared, reflecting white, separating her from the drop beyond. Occasionally her lights would catch the worn stumps of old wooden posts further out, relics from an earlier version of the highway. She kept her gaze fixed between the lines, letting her peripheral vision take care of the rest. The spot mirror remained in the edge of her sight, a liquid oval of potential dread, but she treated it like any other meaningless background object. Halfway down the grade, a whisper of wind slipped through the weather stripping near the passenger door. It made a low, breathy sound, like an exhale right next to her ear. "Easy," she muttered. The guitar music continued its gentle, wordless melody, tinny from the speakers but comforting. She let it wrap around her. Then the CB radio crackled. Dana nearly jumped. She hadn't heard a voice on the thing in over an hour. "Eastbound on Summit," a rough voice said, broken slightly by static. "You got your hands where they need to be, driver?" She swallowed. "Copy that," she answered, pressing the talk button with her thumb without taking her eyes off the road. 10. 4. "Just doing the hill. I see you," the voice replied. It was calm, almost kind. Familiar, though she couldn't place why. "Don't look back." "Not yet." A chill threaded itself between her ribs. "Who is this?" she asked, keeping her tone cautious. Silence. Then the faint sound of someone taking a breath. "You pick something up," the voice said. "Happens up here when the road's empty enough. Most folks don't notice. They keep checking the glass, though. Make it too real." That's when he leans in. Dana's scalp tightened. "What are you talking about?" "You know," the voice said. "Old boy back at Elko would have let something slip. They all do. They like to warn. Makes them feel better about the fact they had to learn the hard way." Dana thought of the man with the unlit cigarette, his offhand line about never seeing his own face as clearly since. "What happens?" she asked carefully. "If I turn around?" "Depends how much you want company," the CB responded softly. For a moment, it felt like the entire cab narrowed down to that single channel and the oval mirror in her peripheral vision. The world outside the windshield dimmed, the guardrails and road signs receding. Dana breathed. "I'm just trying to get across this mountain," she said. "That's all I'm here for." "That's all any of us say," the voice replied. "Keep your heading. You're almost through the part he likes." The road curved again, a gentle right sweeping down across the face of the hillside. To her left, the drop fell away into a sea of darkness. To her right, the rock wall rose close, streaked with mineral stains that gleamed when her lights touched them. In the mirror, some part of her registered, the silhouette had shifted. Without looking directly, she sensed it. The head was up now, watching her. The pressure behind her eyes built like a headache, like someone was standing just at the edge of her peripheral vision in a quiet room, refusing to announce themselves. Another mile marker slid past. She knew this grade. 2 more miles, and it would level. Just enough time for a mind to wander into corners it didn't need to explore. She thought of closing the curtain to the sleeper, but that would mean looking back, lifting her hand off the wheel, acknowledging the space behind her more than she wanted to. Everything in her training pushed against reaching for something while on a steep downgrade anyway. So she drove. Wind whispered. The reefer hummed. The engine brake growled gently on the steepest parts, then relaxed. "Why does he show up?" she asked into the CB, surprising herself with the question. "Maybe he's a piece of someone who didn't make it down," the voice replied. "Maybe he's everyone who ever stared too long into that glass and wondered who would be there for them if they drifted off. Maybe he's just what long nights do to the mind." "That's not an answer." "No," the voice agreed. "It's not." She wanted to ask where the speaker was, but some instinct told her she wouldn't like the answer. Instead, she focused on the next curve, then the next. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, the grade eased. Her ears popped lightly. The guardrails straightened. The road widened. A new sign appeared ahead. "Welcome and plain. Runaway truck ramp. 1 quarter mile." After that, the terrain softened into rolling foothills. The real danger was behind her. Her shoulders eased a fraction. Her jaw unclenched. "Okay," she said quietly, maybe to the voice, maybe to herself. "Now what?" "Now," the CB said, "you don't reward him. He lives on attention, on being seen and then remembered. Think about something else. Call someone. When you've got bars again, put on music with singing in it. Don't give him a name. Don't talk to him. Even in your head." "Is that what you did?" she asked. "A pause. Not the first time," the voice admitted. "But I learned. Static crackled around the words. For just a second, there was a faint echo, like her own voice bouncing back at her from far away. "What's your handle?" she asked, heart beating faster. The answer came faint, warped through interference. "Same as yours once," it said. "Didn't keep it." Her throat tightened. She reached for the mic reflexively, then stopped. Her hand hovered there, mid-air, then closed around nothing and returned to the wheel. "Thanks," she said, not pressing the talk button, only shaping the word inside her mouth. The CB stayed silent. The highway straightened further, cutting through low hills and clusters of scrub. A distant orange glow on the horizon hinted at a small town or truck stop ahead. Her signal bars flickered back to life one by one on her phone screen. Dana became aware of how tense she'd been only when she tried to roll her shoulders and they protested. In the convex mirror, nothing sat in the sleeper anymore. The space showed only darkness and the faint outline of her curtain, gently swaying with the truck's motion. She didn't entirely trust that. Not yet. At the first wide turnout, she signaled and eased onto the shoulder, coming to a gentle stop. The brakes hissed. The engine settled into a softer idle. She sat there for a long moment, hands still on the wheel, feeling the echo of motion hum through her bones. Then, with deliberate calm, she set the parking brake, turned on her hazard lights, and turned in her seat. The sleeper was the same as she'd left it hours ago. Neatly made bunk, small duffel on the floor, a pair of headphones coiled on the pillow. Her jacket hung from the hook, its hood drooping slightly, one sleeve twisted. No one sat on the edge of the bed. She stepped down from the cab and into the cold night air. Gravel crunched under her boots. The sky above was enormous, full of stars. The highway stretched away in both directions, occasionally catching the faint glow of her hazard flashers. She walked around the rig once, hand on the cold metal of the trailer, checking for anything out of place. Everything looked as it should. Tires intact, lines connected, reefer humming at its set temperature. When she climbed back in, she took a moment before closing the door, looking at her own reflection in the side mirror. Her face stared back, tired, focused, a little pale in the artificial light. No one else hovered over her shoulder in the glass. She could have chalked it up to fatigue and suggestion. She considered it. It would be easy to tell herself that, but when she put the truck back into gear and pulled out, she adjusted the mirrors only enough to see the lanes, not the interior of the sleeper. Just for tonight. The little town ahead had a modest truck stop, its sign flickering intermittently. She pulled in, shut down the engine, and sat for a while in the quiet. Inside, the coffee tasted better than the thermos version. A game show played on a mounted TV. A pair of drivers in neon vests argued amiably over the best route through the Rockies. Dana found herself glancing at their reflections in the chrome napkin holder, scanning for anyone sitting behind them who shouldn't be there. Old habits, perhaps, forming faster than expected. She caught her own eyes in the metal surface, distorted but unmistakable. They looked back steadily. Later, in the sleeper, with the curtain drawn fully for once, she lay listening to the soft ticking of the truck as it cooled. Outside, an occasional rig rolled past on the highway, a distant whoosh like a tide. Sleep pulled at her. Just before she slipped under, a thought floated up, clear and simple. Maybe there were things out on the road that rode along with whoever would notice them. Maybe the trick wasn't in never seeing them, but in deciding not to invite them any closer than the glass. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the truck stop lights, the highway stretched on, full of drivers and mirrors and miles. Some of them would glance back too often. Some of them would learn, like she had, to let certain shapes drift out of focus. The night, as always, rolled forward. Story number 4. By the time Malik saw the first sign, the sky had gone from velvet black to that strange, dusty gray that meant the night was deepening, not ending. He was somewhere along eastern Colorado, where the interstate ran straight through miles of dry grass and low, rolling ground. The moon was a fading wedge behind thin clouds. Out there, the wind had nothing to slow it down. It hummed against the sides of his truck in low, restless gusts. Malik Harris sat high in the cab of his white Volvo tractor, hands loose on the wheel, eyes steady on the twin lines of his lane. The reefer trailer behind him vibrated with a quiet, constant hum, keeping 30,000 pounds of frozen chicken at just the right temperature. He'd been driving long enough to get past the novelty, but not long enough to be jaded. 5 years on the road had taught him routines and shortcuts, familiar exits and reliable diners. They had also given him a healthy respect for the small ways a simple night could go wrong. Tonight he was pushing it. Dispatch had called that afternoon with a favor. Could he move up his delivery window, get the load to Kansas City by early morning instead of midday? A winter storm was supposed to roll in by late morning, and the receiver wanted the freight in before the roads got messy. The math had worked, barely. Malik had reset his hours the day before. If everything went smooth, fuel stops quick, no long delays, no surprise inspections, he'd arrive with 30 minutes to spare on his clock. The wind picked up again. The trailer shivered once, then settled. On the right shoulder, a blue sign flashed by. Way station 2 miles. To be prepared to stop. Malik frowned. He knew this road. The way station at mile marker 214, if he remembered right, was usually closed at night. The last 2 times he'd run this stretch, the sign had been covered, the building dark and empty, weeds sprouting through the unused truck scales. He checked the time on his dash. 1:38 a.m. Too late for a surprise inspection, he thought. Most scale houses shut down by midnight unless they were running some special blitz. Still, the sign was lit. The next one, a mile later, confirmed it. Way station 1 mile. Open. He felt a small twist in his chest. Not fear exactly, but annoyance tinged with unease. An inspection would cost him time. A level 1, with a full walk-around and log check, could eat half an hour. Time he didn't have to spare. He watched the horizon. The way station appeared slowly, a low complex of buildings and lanes carved out of the flat land to the right. Sodium vapor lights bathed the whole area in a washed-out orange glow. The open sign over the ramp pulsed steadily. All trucks must exit when flashing. The word must had always bothered him. On better days, Malik joked that it should say please. Tonight, it felt heavier. The ramp signal was flashing. He sighed, hit his right blinker, and eased into the exit lane. Rules were rules. Skipping an open scale could cause more problems than it solved. As the truck dipped off the interstate and onto the way station approach, the sound of the wind changed. It stopped howling steadily and began to come in odd, uneven bursts, like someone exhaling near his ear, then holding their breath. He told himself it was just the way the trees and concrete barriers redirected the air. The lane narrowed. Painted arrows directed him toward a long, low concrete platform scale, its metal plates dull under the harsh light. Ahead, the scale house sat behind broad windows, blinds half-drawn, soft fluorescence glowing behind them. Malik rolled forward until the overhead red light turned amber, then green. He looked at the digital readout mounted beside the window. The numbers flickered, then steadied. 79,740. Well within legal, he muttered. His gross maxed at 80,000. The intercom crackled. Tractor 7814, a woman's voice said, calm and clear. Pull up to the inspection lane, please. He blinked. He hadn't given his unit number. The woman hadn't asked. Automatic recognition, he told himself. Cameras. Sensors. Some of these newer scale houses could read plates and VINs and company logos without anyone touching a keyboard. He pulled forward as instructed, into a narrow lane lined with yellow painted curbs. A low building ran alongside, with windows every few yards where inspectors could step out and start their walkarounds. No one stepped out. He stopped where a sign told him to. The air brakes hissed. The engine settled. For a long moment, nothing happened. The scale house lights glowed. The orange yard lights burned steadily. No traffic howled past on the interstate behind him. The world felt oddly hushed, as if he'd parked inside a photograph. Malik leaned forward, looking toward the main office. A figure moved behind one of the windows. A woman in a DOT uniform, dark hair pulled into a bun, stepped into view. Beige shirt, navy pants, reflective vest half-zipped. Her silhouette was crisp against the fluorescent glow. She lifted a hand and gestured him closer. The window near the front of his cab slid open with a faint scrape. Cold night air spilled in, carrying a faint smell of burnt coffee and paper. Evening driver, she said. Her voice sounded exactly like it had through the speaker. Set your brake and bring in your paperwork, please. I'll need your license and logs. Malik nodded, masking his reluctance. Yes, ma'am. He grabbed his folder with registration, insurance, and medical card. then unplugged his ELD tablet from its dash mount. It continued to blink its blue status light as he tucked it under his arm. The ground felt colder than he expected as he climbed down. His breath puffed in small clouds. The building's door had a round badge decal on it. Colorado Port of Entry. The design looked slightly outdated. An older state emblem, maybe, but he didn't pay much attention to that. Inside, the scale house smelled like every other one he'd been in. A mix of coffee, printer ink, and the faint, lingering tang of wet coats and diesel tracked in on boots. The counters were brown laminate, scuffed at the corners. A rack of brochures about safety regulations leaned crookedly near the door. A single wall clock ticked steadily, its hand sitting at 2:17. The woman behind the counter smiled at him. She looked to be in her late 40s, early 50s, with a lined but kind face. Her name tag read, T. Torres. "Long night, Mr. Harris?" she asked. He paused halfway through, handing over his license. "Have we met?" he asked, suddenly wondering if dispatch had given someone a heads up that he was coming through. She took the card, glanced at it, then at him. "Not officially," she said. "You've been through this area before. I see a lot of trucks." She angled a computer monitor slightly toward herself. Malik glimpsed only a dark screen, green cursor blinking. Old software, he thought, surprised. Most places had flat screens now. Torres gestured to a plastic chair against the wall. "Go ahead and have a seat. I'm going to run your info and take a quick look at your logs. Might do a walk around if we've got time." Malik sat, the ELD tablet balanced on his knee. The chair creaked under his weight. The clock on the wall still showed 2:17. He wasn't sure whether it had moved at all since he'd entered. He thumbed the power button on his tablet to wake the screen. The display read 1:41 a.m., his route map tracing a straight blue line from the last truck stop to here. Duty status. Driving. Torres held out a hand without looking up. "Logs?" she asked. He passed the device to her. She turned it over with an expression of faint curiosity, as though she didn't handle these often. Her fingers were bare, no ring. "Paper or electronic?" she said absently, thumbing through screens. "Doesn't matter, it's all a record." The pause before that last word made Malik's skin goosebump faintly. He glanced around the room. A bulletin board on the far wall held a mixture of notices, updated hours of service charts, brake inspection reminders, an old, sun-faded poster about "Buckle Up, It's the Law" pinned among them were a few laminated pages under a heading that made him squint. In memory of those who didn't make it home, small photos were arranged in neat rows beneath. Faces, mostly men, a few women, some smiling in front of their trucks, others posing with families. Under each picture, a date and a location. I-25 MP 179, US 50 near Cannon City, CO 14 at Poudre Canyon. He looked away, throat tightening a little. Every driver knew how many didn't make it back each year. Seeing their faces in a quiet, fluorescent room made it feel closer. Torres cleared her throat. "You've been running hard tonight," she observed. "Left Elko at, let's see, 1700 local. Couple short stops, no long breaks since." I took my 30 earlier in Utah," Malik said. "I'm legal, just trying to get ahead of that storm." "You're inside your hours," she agreed. "Barely." "You planning to push straight through to Kansas City from here?" He nodded, then forced a shrug. "If all goes well." She studied the screen one more moment, then set the tablet gently on the counter. "You know what the number is, right?" she asked. He frowned. "What number?" Her gaze ticked toward the window, where the digital scale readout was faintly visible in the distance. 79, 740, she said. "You're light on the drives, but pretty heavy on the trailer tandems. You've got room to slide, but not much." He nodded again, wary. "I scaled at the shipper," he said. "They loaded me tight, but I'm legal, nothing overweight." "On paper," she said. "On steel, you're fine." Her eyes met his, very still. "On everything else?" she added, getting close. He didn't know how to respond to that. An uneasy silence stretched across the counter. Finally, Torres picked up a clipboard, scribbled something on a form with a blue pen that had no logo, and slid his license back toward him. "I'm going to walk around your truck," she said. "You stay put for a second. When I come back, I'll give you your copy and you can roll." He hesitated. "Do you need me outside with you?" he asked. At most way stations, drivers were expected to accompany inspectors, help with light checks, answer questions. Not tonight, she said. Just sit. Rest your eyes. Not completely, though. A sliver of dry humor touched her voice on that last line. Malik gave a weak smile and leaned back in the chair. She slipped out the side door. The click of it closing was oddly final. Malik sat alone in the fluorescent light. The scale house felt old, in a way he couldn't quite place. The computer monitors were bulky, their plastic casings yellowed at the edges. The phone on the desk had a curly cord. A calendar on the wall said January 2008 inches faded letters, though someone had taped newer monthly sheets over it. The clock's second hand ticked, but the minute hand remained fixed at 2:17. His own watch said 1:43. He pulled out his phone, more to have something to do than from any expectation of signal. The bars were gone. No 4G, no 3G, not even a lonely E in the corner. The time on the lock screen matched his dash. For a moment, he thought he heard another voice in the building. A man's, low and muffled, as if speaking in another room. The sound leaked faintly through the thin wall, then faded. Maybe another inspector. Maybe a driver in a back office. He realized he hadn't seen any other trucks pulling in behind him. The lot outside had looked almost empty when he arrived. A coffee maker gurgled somewhere. A faint, tinny song played from a radio in another part of the building, hard to make out. It sounded old soft rock, maybe. Curling around lyrics he couldn't quite catch. Been a while since I heard that, someone said behind him. Malik turned. Another driver sat in a chair 2 seats down, where there had been only empty plastic a moment earlier. A big man, 50 or so, with a gray beard and a baseball cap with a faded feed company logo on it. He wore a denim jacket over a flannel shirt, work boots scuffed and stained. Malik blinked. He was sure he would have heard someone come in. The door hadn't opened. No footsteps had crossed the tile. "You on break here too?" Malik asked carefully. The man nodded toward the bulletin board. "They like to keep us waiting," he said. His voice had a slow, mountain drawl. "Gives you time to think about whatever you've been carrying that ain't strapped down right." Malik followed his gaze to the in-memory board, then back. "You mean freight?" he said. The man's eyes crinkled, but his smile didn't quite form. "Sure," he said. "Freight." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, studying Malik with a kind of quiet curiosity. "First time through at night?" he asked. "Through this station?" Malik said. "Yeah, I thought it was usually closed." "Most folks do," the man replied. "Doesn't open for everybody, just when the weight's off." The hair on Malik's arms prickled. "You mean like random inspections?" he said, trying for a lighter tone. "I just got unlucky." The man tilted his head, as if listening to something Malik couldn't hear. "Maybe," he said. Before Malik could press further, the side door opened again. Torres stepped back in, brushing a small streak of dust from her vest. "Airlines look a little tired," she said. "You've got some chafing on the one running to your rear axle. Not through the cover yet, but you'll want to keep an eye on it." Malik stood. "I did a pre-trip," he said almost defensively. "I didn't see any leaks." "No leaks," Torres agreed. "Not tonight. But that line's rubbing a bracket it shouldn't. Couple thousand more miles, you might have a bad surprise depending where you are. Best catch it before a mountain, not on one." Her tone was matter-of-fact, not accusatory. He exhaled. "Thank you," he said. "I'll get it checked as soon as I can stop somewhere that can fix it." She nodded, already writing on the form. "I'm marking it as a verbal warning," she said. "No citation. You're running tight on hours anyway. No sense in keeping you longer than needed." She slid the inspection report toward him. Malik took it and glanced down. In the top corner, under station ID, the number was smudged, as if the ink had bled. He could make out only 214. Under Inspector, the printed name read T. Torres in neat block letters. He looked up to thank her. The other driver's chair was empty. It rocked once, as if someone had just vacated it, then stilled. Torres followed his glance, then looked back at him with an expression he couldn't read. "You're good to go, Mr. Harris," she said, voice gentle. "Next time you get tempted to push past your limit, maybe remember tonight. These roads take what they're owed, one way or another." He swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." He stepped back out into the cold. The night air hit him with a smell of dry earth and exhaust. The wind had died to a faint whisper. His truck sat where he'd left it, marker lights glowing, engine idling patiently. He climbed up, set the inspection form on the passenger seat, and glanced at the clock on the dash. 1:45 a.m. He'd been there, by his measure, barely 4 minutes. That couldn't be right. He looked back at the scale house. The windows glowed, but now the lights seemed dimmer, more distant. The open sign over the entrance ramp had gone dark. He told himself they'd just closed between trucks. Maybe they were doing shift change. He pulled slowly out of the lane, eased onto the exit ramp, and merged back onto the interstate. In his side mirror, the way station shrank, its orange lights fading into the general glow of the horizon. For a moment, in the convex mirror, he thought he saw someone standing outside the scale house door, a figure in a reflective vest, watching the highway. Then the angle changed, and it was only the building again, low and still. He drove. The interstate ahead was empty, the world reduced to what his headlights could touch. Fatigue pressed at his eyes, but the encounter at the scale house had left him wired, jittering quietly inside. 20 miles later, he keyed his CB. "Anybody eastbound passed through 214 lately?" he asked. "Way station's open, looks like," Static answered at first, then a scratchy voice. "Say again?" a driver asked. "You talking about the old 214 on I-70? "Yeah," Malik said. "Port of entry. Got pulled in for a quick inspection just now." The other driver gave a short, humorless laugh. "You pulling my leg, man?" "No," Malik said. "Why?" Silence stretched a moment too long. "That station's been shuttered for years," the voice said slowly. "They tore out half the hardware after that big wreck on the eastbound ramp. No power, no staff." "You sure you weren't at 221? Malik felt his mouth go dry. "I know where I am," he said. "I saw the sign." "Maybe you saw the marker," the man replied. "But there's nothing running out there anymore. Not officially." Static crackled. Then another voice chimed in. "You say you went through 214 at night?" this one asked, older, rougher. "You see Torres in there?" Malik faltered. "Yeah," he said. "Inspector Torres, middle-aged, dark hair. Knew my plate before I said anything." The second driver exhaled slowly. "Well, I'll be." "What?" Malik asked. "Torres died on that ramp," the driver said matter-of-factly. "Couple winters back. Tried to flag a guy down who was coming in too hot with bad brakes. He didn't make the curve. They named the memorial board in the main Denver POE after her. A memory flickered the in-memory board in the scale house, the rows of faces. "You're messing with me," Malik said quietly. "Believe what you want," the older driver said. "But if she told you to fix something, I'd fix it. Consider yourself lucky. Some of us only see her after we've already gone off the road." The CB went Kiat. Malik drove on, mind whirling. Logic wrestled with an odd, rising certainty that what he'd experienced hadn't been normal. At the next large truck stop, 2 hours later, he pulled in and parked under bright LEDs. His legs felt unsteady as he climbed down. In the harsh white light of the lot, everything seemed ordinary again. People moved between trucks and the store, the smell of fryer oil and fuel mixing in the air. A dog barked from the cab of a nearby rig. He walked around to the back of his trailer with his flashlight, heart thudding harder than it should. The wind here was gentler, carrying the faint clink of metal from somewhere in the shop area. He found the airline Torres had mentioned 10 seconds into his check. It ran from the frame rail to the rear axle, rubbing lightly against the edge of a metal bracket. The outer rubber sheath was scuffed and abraded, white strands of reinforcement showing in a narrow line. It wasn't leaking. Yet, he crouched and touched it. The rubber felt cold and dry, fragile. He pictured a long downgrade, the lines vibrating, heating, flexing. One more hard bounce, one more tight turn, a stress point failing. He stood, throat tight. Inside the truck stop shop, the night mechanic looked tired but willing. They found a spare hose in the parts room and swapped the line. The whole thing took 30 minutes. "Good catch," the mechanic said, wiping his hands. "Few more weeks, that would have blown out on you. No question." "Months, maybe," Malik said, hearing his own voice, and not quite recognizing its thinness. The mechanic shook his head. "Nah," he said. "Stuff like that never goes at a good time. Always when you're just about thinking you got away with it." Malik paid, walked back to his truck, and sat in the driver's seat for a long minute without moving. The inspection report still lay on the passenger seat. He picked it up. Under date, there was a smeared stamp. Jan 1720. The last 2 digits were blurred. Under time, it said 2. 17 amperes, M. He looked at his own log. The ELD showed a brief, on-duty inspection status entry from 1:41 to 1:45. 4 minutes. He carefully folded the paper and slid it into his book of permits and registrations, as if it were just another document he might need at some point. When he pulled back onto the highway, the storm clouds had started to gather in the west, low and heavy. Lightning flickered deep inside them, far off. He drove with a little more care than usual that night. Slower through curves. Extra mirrors checks. But this time at the road. The lanes. The shoulders. Not at whatever might stand in the corners of buildings or the spaces between 1 mile marker and the next. Months later, on a different run, he passed mile marker 214 again, this time in full daylight. The way station ramp was there, but the open sign hung dead and blank. The yard was overgrown, grass poking through cracked asphalt. The small building sat boarded over, its windows dark. No lights. No cars. A faded closed notice flapped limply on a post near the entrance. He slowed just enough to look. For a moment, as his truck rolled past, he could have sworn sunlight glinted on glass that wasn't there, that the building's boarded windows were clear, with movement behind them. A figure in a reflective vest maybe standing by the door. Then the angle changed, and the station was only an empty shell again, baking under the high blue sky. He drove on. Later that week, sitting in a different truck stop far away, Malik overheard 2 older drivers talking at the next table. One mentioned the old 214 station, how it used to light up for those who needed a second look. Scale house between miles, the other said, stirring his coffee. If you're smart, you pull in when they call you. If you're not, well, they've got a spot on that board for you too. Malik didn't join the conversation. He just took a slow sip of his drink and stared at his own reflection in the dark screen of his phone. On the road, miles blurred, days blended. Most nights were routine, but every so often when the wind hit just right and the clocks all read the same wrong minute, some exits offered more than fuel and fast food. Somewhere out there, in a pocket of time that didn't quite line up with the rest, a scale house light still burned for a few drivers who were carrying more than they could safely bear. And for those who listened, a woman in a faded uniform might point to the one thing that would keep their wheels on the asphalt a little longer. Story number 5. The desert at night could feel like the bottom of the ocean. Out on Interstate 40, somewhere between Gallup and the state line, the land rolled away in low, dark waves of rock and scrub. Sagebrush huddled in tangled patches along the shoulders. Farther out, the silhouettes of mesas stood like islands against the sky. Above it all, a sheet of stars hung cold and bright. Harper Quinn drove through it in a box of light. Her truck, an older navy blue International with a white reefer trailer, hummed along at 62, the engine a steady, comforting growl beneath her feet. The dash glowed soft orange. The windshield was a rectangle of reflected gauges and moving blackness. It was past 2 in the morning. Harper was in her late 20s, compact and wiry, with close-cropped hair tucked under a faded ball cap. She'd been running long haul for only 2 years, but she'd grown up around trucks. Her dad had hauled freight across the Southwest for decades. She'd spent enough childhood weekends in passenger seats and sleeper bunks that the drone of tires on asphalt felt, in a strange way, like home. The run tonight was simple on paper. High-value electronics from a warehouse outside Phoenix to a distribution center in Oklahoma City. Straight shot east, no mountain passes, no big cities to tangle with at rush hour, just desert, plains, and time. She'd left Flagstaff after sunset with a full tank and a full thermos, planning to drive until her clock told her it was time to stop, then grab a few hours in the sleeper at some quiet truck stop. So far, everything had gone exactly to plan. The music on the radio was low and wordless, a gentle mix of ambient guitar and slow rhythm. The CB was on but quiet. Her phone sat in its mount with the map app glowing faintly blue lines straight ahead, time remaining ticking down. She checked her mirrors more from habit than need. The road had been nearly empty for the last hour. A pair of headlights followed her at a comfortable distance in the left mirror. Another rig pacing her somewhere beyond the reach of her own taillights. Ahead, nothing but the suggestion of the horizon. The interstate signs ticked past in their steady rhythm. Green for exits, blue for services, brown for parks and scenic overlooks she never had time to visit. It was one of those brown signs that caught her eye. Old Desert View, historic Senex route. 1 mile. Trucks. Okay. Harper frowned slightly. She didn't remember that from her last run through here. Back then, she'd been half asleep, though maybe she'd missed it. A minute later, another sign appeared. Old US 40 Scenic Bypass. Next right. Shaves 12 miles. Use caution. Her GPS chimed, the neutral voice sounding in the cab. In 0.6 miles, take the exit on the right to stay on Interstate 40 East. The map still showed the main highway as the preferred route. No indication of any bypass. No alternate blue line. Harper's hand stayed steady on the wheel. Detours were always a gamble, especially with a refrigerated, time-sensitive load. Dispatch liked predictability. So did she. But saving 12 miles meant saving time. Time meant a better cushion if something went wrong later down the line. "Where'd you come from?" she muttered to the sign. The headlights behind her stayed where they were, unbothered. The exit ramp appeared. A green sign rose above it. I Sisher. East. To Albuquerque. Keep left. Under it, a smaller sign pointed toward the right-hand ramp. Old Route 40 divided by Desert View. Next right. Harper checked the navigation again. Her map showed only one line of road. But as she watched, the image on the screen twitched. The blue line blinked, then split for a second into two routes. One labeled EU 40. One labeled Old Route 40. Then it settled, both merging again, as if the software had hiccuped and changed its mind. Her pulse picked up just a fraction. The safe move was to stay on the interstate. The tempting move was to try the bypass. Her delivery window had some flex built in, but not a lot. The dispatch text had been clear. Storm says moving in tomorrow, early are appreciated. A gust of wind hit the side of the trailer. The truck leaned, then righted. "Fine," she said under her breath. "We'll stick to the plan." She kept left, following the main highway. The ramp for Old Route 40 slid past on her right, curving down into a darker strip of pavement heading off into the scrub. As her headlights swept over the entrance, she caught a glimpse of an old-fashioned road sign set a little way back from the modern, reflective ones. US 40. Desert View Bypass. Open all hours. Use at own risk. The paint was faded. The metal was dented. For a moment, it looked like it didn't belong to this decade at all. Then the angle changed, and it vanished into the dark. Harper shook out her shoulders and refocused on the lane ahead. Another 5 miles. 10. The landscape slid by, unnoticed. Her mind drifted between thoughts of home, random songs she half remembered, quiet plans for the next break. The first odd thing happened gradually enough that she almost missed it. The headlights in her left mirror fell away. She noticed their absence only when she glanced back, and saw nothing but her own trailer lights shrinking into the distance. The other truck was gone. No cresting hill, no exit ramp, no gradual turnoff. Just there one moment, then not. She watched the mirror for another 30 seconds. Nothing. "Guess you got bored with my speed," she murmured. But the joke felt a little thin. The highway ahead began to feel heavier. Nothing visibly changed. The same dashed white lines, the same green markers, but the darkness on either side seemed thicker, like ink settling in a jar. The stars above, once sharp and cold, looked slightly smeared, as if seen through a veil of sheer fabric. Her GPS map hiccuped again. The blue line flickered. The little arrow pointing to her truck's position vibrated in place for a moment, instead of gliding smoothly forward. Then, without warning, the screen went gray. No signal, it read. Position temporarily lost. Harper frowned. She checked her phone's status bar. No bars, no LTE, not even the vaguest sputtering dot of service. "That's new," she said softly. Out here, dead zones were common. But usually the GPS chip itself kept working even without data, following satellites higher up. A total loss of position was rare. She reset the app. It tried to reload, then spun once and froze. The arrow fixed in the middle of nowhere. The CB crackled to life. "Anybody eastbound out past Desert View you copying?" a male voice asked, faint under a wash of static. "This is Red Dog. I'm looking for some markers." "Can barely see my own hood out here." Harper hesitated, thumb hovering over the mic button. The channel had been silent for over an hour. The sudden voice startled her more than it should have. She pressed the button. "Red Dog, this is Blue Jay eastbound on 40, she said, using her handle. "I'm maybe 15 out from that Desert View exit. Skies are clear where I am." "What are you running into?" She expected the usual banter in return. Complaints about other drivers, about dispatch, about weather. Instead, the reply came after a long, rough-edged pause. "Dust," the voice said, "or fog. Feels like both. Wind's whipping it up." "You sure you're on 40? "I haven't seen another set of lights in an hour." Harper's grip tightened on the wheel. "Affirmative, Red Dog," she said. "Headed eastbound following the big road. It's dry and open where I am." Static roared briefly, swallowing whatever he said next. When it cleared, a few words emerged. "Mile marker. Can't. These signs. Old." "Mile marker what?" she asked, leaning slightly toward the speaker, as if that could help. 228, he said, the numbers fuzzy but still there. "You near that?" She glanced out the windshield just as a green post slipped by on the right. "Lambe Arshaba. Heskin Prekel. Just past it," she said. "Couple seconds ago. Road's fine." A strained chuckle filtered through the static. "Must be nice," Red Dog said. "Because I can't see the lines in front of me. They sent us over this new alignment. Storm blew up out of nowhere. I thought they were kidding about how bad it could get." "What do you mean, new alignment?" Harper asked. "I-40's been here for..." Another burst of interference swallowed her words. The CB filled with a low, rushing sound, almost like wind across an open mic. Beneath it, she thought she heard other voices, distant and overlapping, like a crowd in another room. "Keep rolling, boys. Stay between the stakes. We're almost to the plaza. Lost him back there, anyone got eyes on. Should have stayed on the old road." Then, as suddenly as it had come, the noise dropped away, leaving only the faint hiss of the carrier. "Red Dog?" she tried. "You still there?" For a few seconds, nothing. Then, "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, it's loud in here. Wind's howling. I'm hugging center and praying I don't kiss anybody coming the other way." Harper swallowed. "There is no other way on 40 where I am," she said carefully. "Eastbound and westbound are split a good distance apart. No oncoming lanes right next to you." "Not on this stretch," he said. "They've still got us on the 2-lane. New interstate's half built. Lines are a joke. They got marker barrels, but I can't see a thing." His words fell into a silence that felt deeper than the cab around her. Something was wrong. Her phone's lock screen still showed the date and time. 2:13 a.m. Wednesday. Familiar. Grounding. Outside, the dark seemed to press a little closer. She tried her GPS again. The screen flickered, then displayed a thin, pale outline of a road labeled OLD, US 40. Desert View, a lineament, running parallel to the thicker Interstate 40 line. Her little directional arrow sat right on the thinner road. She hadn't taken the ramp. She knew that. Her tires had stayed on the main lane. Yet somehow, somewhere in the last few miles, what the map thought and what she knew had drifted apart. The center line beneath her headlights looked different now, too. Narrower, more worn, no reflective plastic tabs, just paint. She felt for a moment like she was driving along the spine of a memory. "Red Dog," she said, keeping her voice level. "What year do you think it is?" The question hung in the air, strange and heavy. "You kidding me?" he asked, sounding annoyed. "Humor me." Another pause. She imagined him squinting through whatever storm he was in, irritated at strange chatter on the radio. 83, he said. "Last I checked. You having some kind of breakdown up there, Blue Jay?" Harper's throat went dry. Her dad had mentioned a storm once, a desert whiteout in the early 80s that came out of nowhere along US 40, before the interstate was fully finished. Stories of trucks creeping at 10 miles an hour, visibility down to nothing, drivers trying to follow taillights and reflectors that weren't really there. A pileup where several rigs and cars had been lost. He'd talked about it in the careful way of someone who'd known people affected, but hadn't been there himself. She'd never thought much about the date. Itienzio by Basha San. Her dash clock blinked, bright red numerals steady. Ardian wed. I think, she began, then stopped, choosing her words. I think we're on different stretches of the same road, she said. Different times. He laughed, sharp and disbelieving. Lady, I've been up all night, but I'm not that far gone, he said. I'm on the same 40 you are, just a worse version. Another sign appeared ahead, its reflective face catching her lights. Desert View Plaza. Truck stop. Fuel. 5 miles. Under it, in smaller, older print, last services before storm-prone area. A smaller wooden sign, half-rotten, leaned at an angle beneath, its faded letters just legible. In memory of those lost in the whiteout of March 3, 1983, Harper's chest tightened. The highway around her was still clear. No dust, no fog. But a strange shimmer moved in the darkness ahead. A faint, wavering curtain across the road. Like heat mirage on a winter night. In the CB speaker, wind rose. We're supposed to make it to the plaza and sit tight if it gets bad, Red Dog was saying. Guy at the last diner said they got space. Heard the new fuel island's nice. You been there? No, Harper said, eyes on that strange wavering in front of her. But I see a sign for it now. Good, he said. Relief colored his voice. I've been out here what feels like days. Can't see the moon, can't see the stars. Just this wall in front of me. If I can get off this stretch, I'll be all right. The shimmering ahead thickened, like a sheet being drawn more tightly across a doorway. Harper felt the urge to take her foot off the accelerator. Every instinct screamed that driving into that wavering patch wasn't smart, yet the road didn't offer an obvious alternative. There were no exits, no turnouts, no gentle on-ramps back to the version of the highway she thought she knew. Her phone buzzed once in its mount. No notification showed on the screen, just the lock image and the time. Arden Shiwufen. The date beneath it stayed stubbornly correct. She tightened her grip. Red Dog, she said. Tell me what you see right now. Right out your windshield. Static grumbled. White, he said, like somebody dropped a milk curtain in front of the truck. I'm following posts on the right. Keep thinking I see faint lights ahead, but they vanish. Had a brief break a few miles back. Saw a gas plume from the plaza, but it went under again. Any traffic? She asked. Not anymore, he said quietly. Heard some chatter about somebody jackknifing back near the ridge. Heard. Yelling. Then nothing. Harper's stomach knotted. She was close to the shimmer now. It looked like a vertical ripple in the air, maybe 20 feet wide, stretching from the ground up out of her headlight's reach. The painted lines seemed to bend slightly as they met it. Listen to me, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. If you see an opening any gap toward a brighter set of lights, toward clearer sky, you take it. Don't follow anything that sounds too calm. Don't chase any taillights, unless you're certain they're real. He scoffed. Sounds like you know something I don't, he said. You get training for this in new driver school? Something like that, she said. She thought of all the things she'd heard at truck stop counters and rest area picnic tables. Bits of stories about old roads that ran under the new ones. About nights when the right combination of weather and timing made one bleed through into the other. Drivers who followed phantom detour signs and never quite found their way back. She'd always filed them under folklore, half believed, half mocked. Now, the shimmer was directly ahead. She eased off the throttle, letting the truck settle a bit. The reefer hummed steadily behind her, its cold cargo oblivious. Here we go, she murmured. The truck slipped into the wavering patch. For a second, everything outside the cab went thin. The world lost some of its color. The stars vanished, as if someone had shut off the sky. The beam of her headlights seemed shorter, clawing only a few truck lengths ahead. Shapes loomed in that foggy not fog. The faint, half-transparent outline of another rig's trailer flickered on the shoulder to her right, then was gone. A suggestion of taillights swam ahead and sank. The CB howled with interference. Blue Jay, you there? I think I see. His voice cut in and out, shredded by static. In the strange, compressed darkness ahead, she saw a cluster of dim lights. Not steady, not fixed, but bobbing slightly, like lanterns in a gust. To the left, barely visible, a different glow shimmered. Lower, broader. The flat, sodium vapor wash of a truck stop lot. She made a choice without fully realizing she'd made it. She steered slightly toward the wider glow. The truck shuddered once, as if it didn't like being pushed sideways in whatever pocket of air it currently occupied. One of her coffee cups rattled in its holder. The dash cam's little blue light flickered. "Red dog," she shouted into the mic, not sure if he could hear it all. "Aim for the truck stop lights. Don't follow anything else. Do you hear me?" For a heartbeat, she thought she saw him. A ghostly cab cut through her beams at an angle, maybe 50 yards ahead. Old paint scheme, rounded lines. A company logo she didn't recognize. Headlights off, or maybe just too dim to see. It moved with a strange, slowed-down motion, like film running at the wrong speed. Inside, she thought she saw the shadow of a man hunched over a wheel. Then the image slid sideways, dissolving into the white murk like ink in water. The pressure in her ears popped. The cab filled with a different quality of sound. The ordinary, low rush of wind and engine and reefer. The fog, dust, whatever it had been, thinned. Stars snapped back into place overhead. The lights of a truck stop bloomed ahead on the right. Desert View Plaza. Trucks. Food. Fuel. A brand new sign, reflective and modern, arched over the ramp. The lot beyond it was half full of rigs and dotted trailers, their marker lights blinking in reds and ambers. Harper's breath left her in a shaky exhale. She took the ramp. The transition from highway speed to lot speed felt sharper than usual, like stepping abruptly from deep water onto solid ground. Her tires crunched over gravel near the entrance, then rolled smoothly onto the wide, clean pavement of the parking lanes. White LED light washed everything with a bright, flat clarity. A convenience store glowed front and center, big glass windows reflecting the pumps outside. A diner section attached to it showed a few booths occupied, silhouettes of people eating, drinking, scrolling their phones. Harper pulled into an open slot at the outer edge of the lot and set the brake. Her hands shook faintly as she flipped off the engine. The sudden quiet inside the cab was almost startling. For a moment, she sat there, fingers still wrapped too tightly around the wheel. The CB hissed softly. "Wu Jay?" She grabbed the mic. "I'm here," she said. "I made it in. I'm at the plaza." Static grumbled in reply. Then a voice pushed through, thin and far away. I saw lights," Red Dog said. Then everything went white again. "Can't feel the road. Can't feel anything." Harper's throat burned. "Keep looking for that glow," she said. "Even if you can't see it yet. Just keep the wheel steady. Don't follow any shadows." A brittle laugh trickled through the speaker. "Lady, I think I passed steady a few hours back," he said. "Feels like I've been out here forever." "Then just keep going," she said, words coming faster, as if she could outrun the static. "Somebody's waiting at the other end, okay? Even if you can't see them." Silence stretched. Then very softly, "You sound like my dispatcher," he said. "She says that every time I call in late. Somebody's waiting, Red. Get here when you can." He drew a breath. It crackled around the edges. "I'll try," he said. "If I see a sign for you, I'll honk." The line fizzed, sound scraping across the channel, and cut out. The CB went back to its background hiss. Harper sat with the mic in her hand, listening to nothing. Eventually, she set it back in its cradle and climbed down from the cab. The night air was crisp, cooler here than out on the open stretch. It smelled of fuel, frying oil, and dust normal, grounding scents. She walked toward the building. As she passed the front, something on the outer wall caught her eye. A plaque, mounted at about shoulder height, in memory of the drivers and travelers, lost in the whiteout of March 3, 1983, Old US 40, Desert View, alignment. Below, a list of names. She scanned them, heart thudding. Midway down, one stood out. See Red Dog Hendricks, driver. Beside it, a small engraving of a semi, etched in outline. Harper lifted a hand as if to touch the metal, then let it fall. The plaque was clean, well kept. Someone had polished it recently. Inside the plaza, under fluorescent lights, life went on normally. A clerk rang up chips and coffee. A kid in a ball cap played with a toy truck by a table. Two drivers discussed tire brands near the coffee machine. Harper bought a fresh drink she didn't really want and sat by a window. From her booth, She could see her truck, sitting solid and ordinary under the parking lot lamps. Beyond it, past the rim of the lot, the desert stretched away into darkness. Nothing moved out there. She glanced at the TV mounted in the corner. A weather report played. A map of the region showing clear skies. No mention of storms. No mention of dust or fog. Her phone buzzed with a text from dispatch. "How's the run?" "Storm track shifted. You've got more time than we thought. Drive safe." She stared at the words for a moment, then typed back a brief, neutral reply. "All good." Taking a short break. On schedule. She didn't mention the ghost of a road she'd somehow slipped onto, or the voice of a man who thought it was 1983, trying to find the same plaza from the other side of a storm. Later, back in the cab, she sat in the sleeper with the curtain half drawn and listened to the CB in the dark for a while. Mostly she heard the usual. A couple of drivers joking, someone warning about a speed trap, a weather report rebroadcast. Once, just as she was drifting towards sleep, she thought she heard a single, distant honk echo through the speaker. Not close, not immediate, like a memory of sound. She smiled, a small, sad curve of her mouth, and let her eyes close. In the morning, the desert looked ordinary again. Bright sun, clear sky, long horizon. The GPS line showed only Interstate 40, smooth and unbroken. The exit for Old Desert View existed on the screen as a minor road, gray instead of blue, labeled barely in small letters. As she passed it in daylight, she glanced to the right. The ramp was there, cracked and narrow. A rusted US 40 shield sign leaned at an angle in the weeds. No traffic used it. At the top of the old road, just visible before it curved away, stood a small wooden post with a rectangle of metal nailed to it. Something faintly blue caught the light. From this angle and distance, she couldn't read the words. She drove on. Out on the highway, between mile markers and fuel stops, roads crossed more than just distances. Some nights, under the right sky, they reached sideways, too touching the echoes of routes that had been rerouted, buried, forgotten. Most drivers never noticed. Some did. And for those, the trick was simple, if not easy. Keep some part of yourself anchored firmly in the time and place you belong to, even as the lines on the pavement and the voices on the radio tried to pull you into stories that had already happened. Harper kept one eye on the road ahead, and one small part of her mind on a voice from another year, hoping it had in some way found its way through. Story number 6. The first time Lionel Grant heard the truck breathe, he was parked on level ground with the engine off. It was impossible, which was exactly why it bothered him. He sat in the driver's seat of his newly bought Peterbilt, hands resting on his knees, the lot lights of the small Ohio truck stop casting a pale yellow wash through the windshield. It was just past midnight. Outside, the air was cool and still. The world felt like it was holding its breath. Inside the cab, something exhaled. Not the subtle ticking of cooling metal, not the faint sighing of air leaks in the lines he knew those sounds. He'd been a mechanic for 15 years before he ever thought of driving. This was different. A slow, low breath from somewhere behind him, like someone leaning back on the sleeper bunk, exhaling after finally sitting down. Lionel turned his head toward the curtain. Nothing moved. The navy blue fabric hung still, the faint imprint of his hand where he'd smoothed it earlier. He waited. Silence settled again, thick enough to feel on his skin. "Old pipes," he said to the empty cab, as if explaining it to someone. "Expansion, pressure, whatever." The words didn't convince him entirely. He loved this truck. That was part of the problem. The Peterbilt was older, a long nose model from the early 2000s, painted deep metallic red that looked almost black at night. He'd bought it at an auction lot outside Indianapolis, a bank repo from a small carrier that had folded. The price had been just low enough to tip his lifetime of maybe someday into right now. The cautionary comments had started the same day. "Careful with that one," an older driver at the auction had said, squinting at the truck through cigarette smoke. Old copper's got a lot of miles and a lot of stories. Lionel had thought he meant maintenance, breakdowns, expensive surprises. "What kind of stories?" he'd asked, mostly curious. The man had shrugged. "Heard the last guy didn't make it back in it," he'd said. "Some heart thing or a bad night on black ice, depends who you ask." Either way, he was found in that cab at a rest area mile marker 391. They hauled the truck back, cleaned it up, slap new tires on it, and here we are. He'd spoken as if discussing the weather. Trucks outlive drivers all the time. It was part of the math of the job. Still, the story had lodged somewhere behind Lionel's ribs. He'd run his hand along the Peterbilt's fender, feeling the metal cool and smooth. "She runs well?" he'd asked the auction rep. "Solid," the rep had said. "Engine's been rebuilt, new clutch, decent rubber all around. You take care of her, she'll take care of you." That promise had felt true. So here he was, 2 weeks later, on his first solo long-haul run as an owner-operator, Minnesota to Virginia. Building materials eastbound, then a backhaul of packaged foods to bring him close to home. The route was familiar from his company days. The truck, less so. He'd spent the first day listening intently to every vibration, every whine and rattle, cataloging them the way a doctor might listen to a patient's chest. Most sounded healthy. A few he'd mentally noted for future TLC and intermittent dash buzz, a loose trim piece singing now and then in the wind. The breath still didn't fit. He rolled his shoulders, reached for his thermos, and took a sip of coffee that had gone lukewarm. The drink steadied him, anchored him, in the normal. Outside, a reefer unit on another rig kicked on, humming into the night. Lionel checked his clock. He had another 4 hours left before his logbook demanded he stop. The highway ahead would be mostly flat, mostly empty. Night driving. A good time to get to know the truck. He turned the key. The Peterbilt woke with a familiar low rumble, gauges coming alive in a soft glow. The scent of warmed diesel and faint old citrus air freshener filled the cab. "Let's go, Copper," he murmured, the name slipping out before he'd quite decided what to call her. The red paint looked almost coppery under certain lights. The name fit. He pulled out of the lot and onto the on-ramp, the world outside his windshield shrinking to twin beams cutting through the dark. He settled into the rhythm of the road. Gear changes. Wind noise. The quiet, constant exchange of man and machine. For the next hour, nothing strange happened. He passed a few sets of headlights, traded the occasional blink of high beams with other trucks, listened to a late-night station that played blues and weather updates. The moon hung low over fields, occasionally disappearing behind small, trembling stands of trees. Sometimes, when he glanced at the chrome of his gear shift or the reflection in the side window, he thought he saw another outline layered faintly over his own broader shoulders, a cap pulled low, a different shape of jaw. But when he looked directly, it was only his face, caught in distortion. He told himself it was just his mind learning the angles of this new cab. Near the state line, a deer leapt from the ditch. It happened in that odd, stretched way dangerous things sometimes do. One moment, the road ahead was empty. The next, a pale blur vaulted over the guardrail, landing with its hooves skittering on the shoulder, muscle and panic propelling it directly into his lane. Lionel's hands moved. Or they tried to. The steering wheel jerked gently but firmly to the left an instant before his fingers could clamp down for a hard swerve. The engine brake bloomed with a low, controlled roar he hadn't triggered. The truck decelerated in a smooth, measured way, enough to buy a fraction of a second. The deer froze in the beams, eyes wide, then bounded across and out of the way. Lionel's foot finally caught up, easing the brake pedal as the truck rolled past the empty patch of road where the animal had been. His pulse hammered in his throat. He coasted for a few seconds, regaining his breath, then guided the rig back into the center of the lane. "What was that?" he whispered. The dashboard stared back with indifferent green numbers. He knew exactly how much pressure it took to engage the engine brake on this truck. He'd been practicing with it all day, learning the feel of the switch. He hadn't touched it. His hands had been on the wheel, not the stalk. Yet he'd felt the jake kick in, the subtle shift in the engine's song. An electrical glitch, he told himself. A sticky switch. Maybe his hand had brushed it without him realizing. Still, as the miles ticked by, another thought pressed in. Whatever had happened, it had helped. If he had panicked, stomped too hard, or overcorrected, that encounter could have ended with twisted metal and flashing lights. The move had been exactly as measured as something done 1,000 times before. He hadn't driven 1,000 nights in this truck. Someone else had. "Thanks," he said softly to the dash. The radio crackled faintly, just static. He drove on. As the night stretched, small things accumulated. The radio presets inexplicably shuffled, leaving the oldie station on the first button, even though he was sure he'd set it to news earlier. The cruise control clicked off by itself just before a long, gentle bend in the road, where black ice was known to linger in colder months, even though tonight was dry and clear. Once, when he reached instinctively toward the glove compartment for his atlas, the latch popped open a half-second before his fingers touched it, as if something on the other side had already started to do the same. Inside, amid registration papers and a few crumpled napkins, lay an old photograph. Lionel picked it up at the next red light in a small town, curiosity overriding the little twinge in his gut. It showed the same truck, unmistakable in its long hood and color, parked in front of some mountain overlook. The paint gleamed fresher, the chrome brighter. A man leaned against the fender, arms crossed, looking at the camera with a half smile. Broad shoulders, ball cap, lines around the eyes that came from sun and laughter both. On the back, in blue ink, someone had written, "Gus, mile 391. Made it one more time." The one had been underlined twice. Lionel stared at the words until a car horn behind him jarred him back. The light had turned green. He tucked the photo carefully back into the glove box, hands steady, and drove. As the clock edged toward 3, fatigue crept in around the edges of his thoughts. He knew better than to ignore it. Owner-operator or not, he didn't push past the point where white lines blurred into each other and the hum of tires became too soothing. But he also knew there were only a few decent places to stop on this stretch. One of them was the rest area near mile marker 391. The coincidence wasn't lost on him. He considered a truck stop 10 miles earlier, but the lot looked overly full as he glanced at it, rigs jammed at odd angles. The rest area, he knew, had dedicated truck parking, wide and quiet. He signaled, changed lanes, and let the miles count down. 385, 387, 389. The night outside the windshield felt thicker now, the darkness crowding just beyond the reach of his headlights. Forested hills rose on either side, trees pressing close. The road dipped, then climbed in a long, gradual curve. The rest area entrance appeared, its blue sign punctured by bullet holes, reflective paint dulled by years of weather. Rest area, 1 mile. Trucks. Welcome. Lionel felt the faintest pressure on the steering wheel. Not quite resistance. More like a suggestion. A subtle pull to the right, as if the truck knew the ramp as well as the straightaway. "I was going to stop anyway," he said to the empty cab, half amused, half unsettled. The ramp curved gently up to a plateau of dimly lit pavement. A low brick building sat at the center, vending machines glowing behind glass. The lot was only a quarter full, a few trucks spaced out neatly, most with curtains drawn. He eased Copper into an empty slot near the edge of the lot and set the brake. The air hissed, echoing off the trees. For a moment, he stayed where he was, listening. The truck ticked as it cooled. Somewhere, a trailer door clanged shut. Crickets hummed in the grass beyond the light poles. No phantom breathing this time. He let out a long sigh of his own, the fatigue rising up all at once now that he'd stopped. His eyes felt gritty. His shoulders ached. "Good run," he said, patting the dash. "We'll get some sleep." He turned off the key. The cab went dark, save for the faint glow of a few indicator lights and the tiny blue dot of the dash cam. The silence that followed did not feel empty. After a few seconds, he heard it again. A quiet inhale, somewhere behind the curtain. Then a slow exhale, long and measured, like the sound someone makes when settling onto a pillow after a long day. Lionel's hand froze halfway to the bunk. He could walk away, climb down, lock the truck, and sleep in the building on one of the plastic chairs, pretending he wasn't rattled. No rule, unwritten or otherwise, said he had to share a small space with something he didn't understand. Instead, he reached for the curtain and pulled it aside. The sleeper glowed faintly with streetlight through the side windows. The bunk was neatly made, the way he'd left it at the start of the trip. A small shelf held a paperback, his phone charger, and an extra bottle of water. The air held the faint scent of detergent and the cheap pine air freshener he'd stuck near the vent. There was no one there, yet the impression remained. The far side of the mattress had a very slight dip, as if someone had just gotten up. The fabric there was wrinkled in a way the rest was not. Lionel stared, heart thudding in his chest. Something inside him, a stubborn, practical piece formed by years of turning bolts and chasing down elusive noises, rose up. "All right," he said, voice steady in the small space. "If you're here, you're here, but I've got rules." He felt ridiculous the moment the words left his mouth. talking to air, negotiating with space. Still, he continued, no playing with the brakes when I'm on ice, he said. No turning off the lights or the engine while I'm moving up a grade. You want to tap the Jake when I miss something? Fine. You see something I don't, you let me know. You saved us a deer tonight. I'll give you that. The truck was silent. And one more thing, he added. No. Breathing like that when I'm about to fall asleep. It's weird. A faint creak came from the bunk, like a weight shifting slightly. The dip smoothed out a little, the fabric relaxing. Then nothing. Lionel climbed into the sleeper, lay down on his side, and pulled the blanket up. Sleep came in fits, then more steadily. In the halfway space between awake and dreaming, he thought he felt the mattress pressed down behind his knees, the way it did when someone else lay on the other side. He dreamed of highways that looped back on themselves, of mile markers that all read 391. When he woke, pale morning light was seeping around the edges of the curtain. Birds chirped faintly somewhere outside. Another truck's engine growled to life nearby. He was alone on the bunk. The rest of the run east wasn't peaceful, exactly, but it had a rhythm. A few more times, the truck seemed to anticipate things, slowing gently before he spotted a state trooper tucked behind an overpass, flicking the wipers one notch higher, right as a sudden spray from a passing truck hit the windshield. Once, when he reached for the headlight knob at dusk, he realized his beams were already on. Each time, the help came a hair before his own instinct. Never so overt, it wrested control from him. Just a nudge. It was unnerving. It was also hard to resent. On the second night, cutting through West Virginia's hills, the real test came. Fog had rolled in heavy and low between the ridges, turning the world beyond his hood into a swirling gray wall. His speed dropped. He leaned forward, gripping the wheel a little too tight, following the faint glow of the right side fog line. His eyelids burned with tiredness. The stress of the day, of constant watchfulness, pressed on him. He'd planned to stop earlier, but the last rest area had been closed, cones across the entrance, and the next one was still 20 miles away. His head tipped forward once, a microsecond longer than a blink. The horn blared. Lionel jerked, heart slamming against his ribs. The truck vibrated. For a half second, he was certain he had drifted into the wrong lane, or toward the barrier, and something Gus, his mind supplied, though he hadn't meant to name it, had yanked him awake. But the lane lines were still where they should be. Nothing loomed ahead. The radio, which he'd turned down earlier, crackled. The volume knob twisted itself a fraction under his hand as an old rock song swelled into the cab, drums and guitar beating in time with his pulse. Okay, he breathed. Okay, I'm up. His fingers shook slightly. He focused on each second, on each fraction of distance. Mile marker 379, he muttered as they passed it. 380. Almost there. The fog thickened, then thinned. Headlights of other vehicles appeared now and then. Small bullet points of light. Then smeared shapes. Then nothing again. At 387, the truck's engine brake engaged on its own, bringing them gently from 50 to 45 without his input. Not yet, Lionel said aloud. I've got it. We're fine. The Jake released. The features of the road sharpened slightly. At 389, he saw why. The faint sweep of red and blue lights flashed ahead, just visible in the milky air. As he drew closer, the scene resolved. A sedan half off the road, hazard lights blinking weakly, state trooper behind it, cones set out. 2 minutes earlier, those cones would have been almost invisible. Lionel eased past at a cautious, respectful pace. In the corner of his eye, through the passenger window, he caught a glimpse of a figure in a reflective vest turning toward his truck. For a half moment, the face he saw wasn't the trooper's. It was the man from the photograph, features lined and solid, cap low over his eyes. Gus, watching the road like he still owned a piece of it. Lionel looked again. Only the officer stood there now, breath steaming in the damp. By the time he pulled into the next rest area, the fog had thinned to a ghost of itself. The lot was more crowded this time, trucks arranged in uneven rows. He backed into a space between a tanker and a flatbed, set the brake, and let out a long breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Thanks, he said quietly to the empty air. From the back of the cab came a soft, almost inaudible sound. Not a breath this time, more like a chuckle. Months later, Lionel would know the truck's moods almost as well as he knew his own. He learned which stretches of road made the dash lights flicker, which stations the radio seemed to prefer when left on scan, which rest areas the truck seemed reluctant to pull into, idling a touch rougher until he chose a different exit. He asked a few questions at truck stops, always casual, about a driver named Gus, who used to run a red Peterbilt through these parts. Stories came in fragments. A guy who'd never missed a delivery until the night he didn't make it past mile marker 391. A man who'd done one last mountain run against doctor's orders. A driver who'd been found sitting upright in his seat at a rest area, eyes closed as if napping, key turned to off. No one could agree on the details. The only thing they all agreed on was this. He loved that truck, they said. Said he couldn't imagine handing the keys to anyone else. Life on the road rolled on. New loads, new destinations. Oil changes and tire rotations. Way stations and dock delays. The practical, everyday realities of the job. And, woven through it, small, strange mercies. A horn that sounded at just the right time. A brake that whispered to life a second before his foot moved. A radio that crackled with an old song about roads and chances the moment he most doubted his choice to buy the truck at all. One autumn evening, as leaves burned red and gold along the shoulders of a highway in Pennsylvania, Lionel pulled into a tiny diner that still let trucks park along its wide gravel lot. He left the truck idling while he went in for a hot meal. When he came back out, full and drowsy, the Peterbilt sat in the fading light like any other machine metal and paint and glass. He climbed in, closed the door, and rested his hand lightly on the wheel. "We're still here," he said. "Both of us." The gauges flickered briefly, their needles bouncing once before settling. It might have been nothing more than a minor voltage fluctuation. It felt like acknowledgement. Out on the highway, night gathered again, bringing with it all the ordinary dangers of long-distance driving. Fatigue, weather, distraction, other people's mistakes. Lionel faced them with both hands on the wheel, one eye on the mirrors, and a subtle awareness that he wasn't the only one invested in getting this particular truck and its driver home in one piece. Somewhere between the familiar sounds of engine and road, an old habit persisted, a presence that refused to let go of the routes it had run so many times before. And in that small, humming world of gauges and glass, where the outside darkness pressed close and the white lines slid past in an endless ribbon, two lives, one finished. One still unfolding, shared the same seat, listening for the next curve in the road. Story number 7. On long stretches of interstate, the glow in the mirrors was just part of the scenery. Brake lights, headlights, occasional flashes of chrome from another truck's grille. Most drivers learn to stop thinking of them as individual vehicles, and instead as a kind of moving weather drifting around them. Jordan Lee had done this long enough to feel that way most nights. He was 42, broad-shouldered from years of loading his own pallets when he had to, with a face that had settled into a permanent halfway expression between a frown and a tired smile. His brown hair was threaded with early gray at the temples. The cap on his head had the logo of a trucking company he no longer worked for. He was 2 days into a west-to-east run California to Pennsylvania, a refrigerated trailer full of produce, humming steadily behind his cab. The desert was long behind him now. He'd pushed through Nevada and Utah, ridden out a bout of high winds in Wyoming, and was cutting through Nebraska under a sky that looked like brushed steel. It was the kind of trip where miles blurred, fields blurred, exit signs blurred. The only things that really existed were the fuel stops, the way stations, and the next place he might reasonably pull over to sleep. The first time he noticed the car, it was near midnight. He was eastbound on Eef Wadey, somewhere between North Platte and Kearney. The world beyond his headlights was just a soft smear of fields and dark farmhouses. His truck's dash lights glowed dim blue. The CB was quiet. A podcast about old baseball games murmured from his phone, but he wasn't really listening. He checked his mirrors out of habit. In the right side mirror, his trailer stretched back in its usual silver bulk. In the left, the world fell away in a curve of asphalt and the hazy cone of his taillights. And there, about 10 truck lengths behind him in the left lane, floated a pair of headlights that didn't quite match anything else on the road. One was slightly dimmer than the other. The driver's side beam had a yellowish tint, the passenger side a harsher white. Together they made a subtle, uneven pattern. They wobbled a little with the motion of the car, but stayed steady in relation to his truck. Jordan watched them for a minute. The car didn't gain on him, didn't fall back, just hung there, the distance between them like a line someone had drawn at exactly that point, and no closer. "Okay," he murmured. "Pick a speed." He was running a comfortable 63 in a 65 zone. He nudged the cruise control up to 65. The engine note rose a little. The headlights behind him grew smaller, but only a little, as if the driver finally let themselves slip back. When he knocked it back down to his original speed a few minutes later, the headlights moved up again, reclaiming their old place like a dog returning to the same spot on a rug. Jordan shrugged to himself. It wasn't the strangest thing he'd seen. Maybe the other driver was tired and zoning out. Maybe they were one of those folks who like to let a big rig clear the path ahead of them at night. He signaled, slid into the right lane, and waited for the car to pass. It did not. The headlights shifted with him, still in his left mirror, still exactly where they'd been before, just behind his trailer's left rear corner, like they were content to live in that blind spot. Jordan's jaw tightened. "All right," he muttered. "We're not doing this." He flicked his headlights off and on in quick succession. A gentle warning. "Standard language out here. I see you. Either pass or back off." The car didn't react. He tried again, a little sharper this time. Still nothing. In the mirror, the beams remained, twin ovals of off-white light hanging in the dark. Eventually, another set of headlights appeared far behind, much brighter, moving faster. A pickup, judging by the height. It came up, blinked, signaled, and swung out to pass. As it drew level with Jordan's cab, he glanced back in the mirror. For a brief second, the newer vehicle's high beams flooded the space behind his trailer. There was nothing there, just empty road and the gray sheen of the interstate. Then the pickup pulled ahead, his eyes adjusted back to the lower light. The twin uneven beams returned to where they had been, as if they'd never left. Jordan's fingers tightened on the wheel. "Too many hours," he said under his breath. Mind playing tricks. He'd been careful with his log. His electronic recorder showed he was within his hours, with a proper break earlier in the evening. But the body kept its own kind of time. Some days felt heavier than others. At the next rest area, he signaled and took the ramp. The parking lot was half full. Trucks lined neatly along the back, cars clustered near the building. Sodium lights bathed the concrete in orange. He rolled to a stop, set the brake, and watched his mirrors. No headlights followed. No car peeled off behind him. The traffic that passed on the main highway beyond looked normal. Little threads of light moving, merging, diverging. Jordan clicked off his headlights and waited another minute. Still nothing. He told himself that was that. He grabbed his thermos, used the restroom, stretched his legs, and got back into the truck. When he pulled onto the interstate again, the road behind him was empty. By the time he reached Iowa the next afternoon, the odd moment was just a story he might tell someone someday if the conversation went that way. Nothing more. The second time it happened, he was less willing to laugh it off. He was somewhere in Illinois now, the flatness broken only by occasional clusters of lights where small towns huddled near exits. It was later than he'd planned to drive closer to 1:30 in the morning. Construction earlier had cost him an hour. He wanted to make it to a particular truck stop with showers and decent coffee. The road had thinned to just a few vehicles, most of them trucks. Jordan kept a small, constant bubble of distance around him, adjusting speed and using the right lane whenever possible. It was an old habit from a bad night 10 years earlier, when a sudden pileup in fog had taught him how fast everything could close in. Tonight, the air was clear. The sky overhead was a low ceiling of cloud, reflecting distant city glow. He checked his left mirror. The car was there. Same uneven headlights. Same exact distance, about 10 trailer lengths back. He could see more detail now. A rounded hood. A low profile. Not one of the newer sleek cars, but something older. Maybe late 92nds, early 2000s. A sedan with a long body and a trunk that sloped gently down. His goot tightened. He watched the pattern of light against the road. The right beam was a little higher than the left, skewed slightly, as if the front end had been knocked around at some point and never quite realigned. He thought he could make out a faint dark line across the front bumper, a stripe or a scrape. He shook his head once, as if to clear it, and glanced forward again. Lane lines, signs, the green glow of his GPS. Everything ordinary. When he looked back, The headlights had not moved. He tried the same tactics as before. He sped up. The car fell back, but 20 minutes later, after he'd eased off again to avoid catching up to a slower truck, it was right where it had been. He slowed to just under the limit, letting other traffic stack up and pass. The car waited until the lanes cleared, then slid neatly back into its chosen spot, as if tethered to his bumper by an invisible rope. At one point, he took an exit for no reason other than to see what would happen. The ramp curved away from the interstate, leading to a small crossroads lit only by a couple of gas stations and a closed diner. Jordan circled one of the lots and headed for the re-entry. As he did, he watched the highway above. Cars passed. One truck. No sedan with uneven headlights. He merged back, merged up to speed, checked his mirror. The deputy headlight pair settled back into their place behind him, calm, patient, as if they'd always been there. Jordan felt his skin crawl, slow and fine. He thought of calling someone. His sister, maybe. Another driver he knew who ran nights. Just to hear a normal voice and tether himself back to the everyday. But his signal bars were low, one little sliver, flickering between service and no service. The CB had been mostly dead all evening, only occasional static and a distant voice or two. He gripped the wheel and repeated the same sentence in his head for the next 50 miles. It's just another car. Nothing more. Eventually, exhaustion won out. Near 2:30, he pulled into a familiar truck stop he liked for its wide bays and halfway decent breakfast food. He swung slowly around the lot, counting open spaces. In his mirrors, alongside the glow of the building and the rows of parked trucks, the sedan slid in behind him. Its headlights washed over trailers and pavement, picking out edges. He chose a spot near the back row, put the truck into reverse, and backed in. As he straightened out, he caught a glimpse of the car in the convex mirror. It parked 3 spaces over, facing outward, nose toward the exit. The lights clicked off. He killed his own lights and engine and sat there. For a minute, he didn't move. This was the part where someone got out, locked their doors, went inside or climbed into their own vehicle's back seat. Something. Movement that proved this was just another traveler doing what he was doing. Nothing happened. The car's silhouette sat under a sodium lamp. Dark paint. Maybe green or blue. Hard to tell in the weird color. The shape of the body was older, boxier than modern sedans. Rounded corners but solid lines. The windows were near black from this angle. Tinted, or just reflecting the night. Jordan's heart thudded a little too loud in his ears. He told himself to stop being dramatic, to get out, walk over, and prove to himself he was being silly. He climbed down from the cab, boots hitting the pavement with a hollow thud. The air was cool and smelled of diesel, fryer grease, and something faintly metallic. He walked around the front of his truck, toward the store entrance, eyes sliding sideways to the car without meaning to. Up close, it was more ordinary than he'd expected. A faded teal sedan with a dent on the front passenger side fender, rust starting around the wheel wells. An old state inspection sticker clung to the lower driver's side corner of the windshield, the date too far away to read. The windows were dark, not tinted. The glass was just reflecting the bright lights of the truck stop and the orange-white wash of the lamp overhead. His own shape moved faintly on the surface. He slowed, squinting, trying to see inside. For a fraction of a second, he thought he made out a pale oval. A face. Features indistinct. Looking straight ahead. Not at him. Perfectly still. Then he turned his head a fraction, and the reflection shifted, snapping, as if that glimpse had been all angle and nerves. He forced himself to keep walking. Inside, he used the restroom, splashed cold water on his face, and bought a sandwich he didn't really want. When he came back out 10 minutes later, the car was still there. He waited another 20 minutes in the cab after that, watching. No doors opened. No engine started. No one walked up or away. Finally, sheer tiredness pulled him toward the sleeper. Whatever this was, coincidence, prank, imagination, it could wait. His body couldn't. He slept fitfully, dreamless, and shallow. Once, in the middle of that half-sleep, he heard the faint sound of tires crunching gravel nearby, and the soft sweep of headlights across his closed curtain. When he woke to gray light seeping around the fabric, the sedan was gone. The spot where it had been was empty, a dark rectangle of oil spots and old skid marks. He finished the rest of Illinois and Indiana with a knot in his stomach and too much coffee in his veins. By the time he hit Ohio, fog had started to gather in the low spots. The radio flickered in and out of local stations. His mind kept drifting back to a night 10 years earlier on a different highway, when fog and tired drivers and one car braking too hard had turned a stretch of asphalt into a tangle of taillights and twisted metal. He'd gotten through that one mostly unscathed. His co-driver hadn't. Guilt was its own kind of passenger. It sat behind his ribs on nights like this and breathed when he didn't want to think about breath at all. The third time he saw the car, he stopped pretending it was nothing. He was on a two-lane state route now, detoured off the main interstate due to construction somewhere around Akron. The GPS had guided him along this narrower road, through smaller towns and stretches of dark woods that closed in right up to the shoulder. It was late again. Later than he'd planned, again. A parked train and a long checkpoint inspection had eaten into his day. The trees along the roadside looked like they'd been there since before the road, tall and close. His headlights carved a narrow tunnel through them. He checked his mirror on a gentle bend. There it was. Even on a two-lane, where headlights of oncoming cars flooded the mirrors more often, he recognized that pattern. One pale, one harsher white. One a little high, one a little low, following that same tenor-length distance, like it was a rule of physics. Every so often, an approaching car's beams would wash over the sedan, making it a darker shape against the flash. It never swerved, never drifted over the center line, never pulled closer. The feeling that had been a crawling unease deepened into something more solid. It felt like being watched, or weighed. Jordan swallowed, throat dry. He ran through possibilities. Maybe someone from his past. An angry customer, an ex-coworker, someone who blamed him for that pileup years back. The story had made local news, not national. He'd been cleared. It wasn't on him, but stories had ways of twisting in people's minds. If someone had decided to hound him, they'd have to be truly dedicated. 2 days, multiple states, erratic fuel stops. It didn't add up. The other possibilities settled into his thoughts more quietly, the way fog creeps into low places. Maybe this wasn't about him at all. Maybe he'd simply crossed paths with something that liked to follow. The road shouldered through a patch of thicker forest. Branches arched over, making a partial tunnel. His headlights caught small patches of mist hanging low over the asphalt, swirling lazily. His GPS map zoomed in and out on its own, as if recalculating small details. The voice had gone quiet. No more prompts. A sign loomed up on the right. Rest area divided by scenic overlook, 2 miles. Truck parking limited. He didn't know this one. It was too small to have appeared on his usual mental map of places to stop. But his eyes burned with the need to not be driving, just for a little while. And he wanted, now more than ever, to be somewhere he could stand on solid ground and look back at the car without glass between them. He signaled early, as if warning the sedan behind him of his intent. Old habit. Courtesy. The right-a-turn arrow for the rest area appeared. He took it. The ramp was short, rising slightly, then flattening out into a small loop of pavement around a central island of grass and low shrubs. On one side, a few angloon spaces for cars. On the other, 3 longer slots for trucks, arranged in a curve that followed the edge of the hill. Beyond the guardrail, darkness dropped away. A valley, judging by the faint light scattered below. He rolled into the farthest truck slot and shut off his lights. The engine purred, then quieted. As he turned the key, he watched the entrance. The sedan's headlights floated up the ramp a few seconds later. Part of him had expected it to keep going, to vanish back into the forest, the game over when the main road ended. It did not. It eased into the car portion of the lot and came to a stop facing away from him, nose toward the drop. Its taillights glowed dull red, then clicked off. Now there was only darkness and the faint wash of bluish light from a single, old lamp near the center island. Jordan sat for a moment, fingers resting on the steering wheel, breathing slowly. He knew what every cautious instinct would tell him. Stay put. Lock the doors. Let it be there. And leave as soon as he felt rested enough. Don't go looking for trouble. But another part of him knew how long certain questions could burrow if left unanswered. He climbed down. The air at the overlook was cooler than down on the road. It carried a hint of damp earth and leaves. Somewhere far below, a river moved in slow, dark wait. The car sat 40 yards away. Its shape was a little clearer now. Teal paint, dulled by age. That dent on the fender looked deeper up close, as if whatever hit it had done more than cosmetic damage. The license plate was streaked with grime. He could make out the state, but the month and year tabs were too faded in this weak light. The interior was a cave of shadow. Jordan walked forward until he was about 10 feet from the driver's door. "Hey," he said, voice sounding too loud in the quiet. "You okay?" Nothing answered. No rustle, no cough, no click of locks. He took another step, angled his head, trying to peer through the glass. His own reflection met him, gray U-streaked hair, drawn mouth, faint lines around his eyes. Behind it, for a heartbeat, another outline overlapped his. Someone sitting behind the wheel, features lost in the dark, but unmistakably present. The hairs on the back of his neck lifted. He thought of turning on the flashlight on his phone, then hesitated. Something about flooding that interior with harsh, artificial light felt wrong, like barging into a stranger's bedroom without knocking. Instead, he moved slowly around the front of the car, footsteps crunching on old gravel. From the front, the damage was more obvious. The grille was slightly twisted. The right headlight casing had a fresh-looking plastic lens over it, while the left was older, clouded. A long scratch ran from the center toward the passenger side. He'd seen pictures like that before. After incidents, a memory rose without his consent. 10 years ago. Fog. The sound of horns and brakes and, later, sirens. His truck angled on a shoulder in a wedge of exhausted luck. His co-driver, Alex, motionless. A line of cars behind them, some dented, some crushed. One teal sedan with its front end crumpled, airbag deployed, driver slumped forward. He'd given his statement, answered questions, watched paramedics work. They'd put a blanket over his co-driver. Over the driver of that car. Lately, he didn't think about that night much. When he did, it came in fragments. Guilt he knew rationally wasn't earned, but which had settled in anyway. All the small what-ifs. He reached the passenger side door of the sedan and looked in. The seat was empty. No scattered belongings. No fast food wrappers. No car seat. Just bare, cracked vinyl, and the faint outline of where someone's weight had once been, many times over. He circled to the back. The license plate read an old year. Too old. Plates were renewed every so often. This one had expired half a decade ago. If his eyes weren't playing tricks. His breath showed faint in front of him, a small ghost in the air. He stood there, halfway between wanting to knock on the trunk for no reason at all, and wanting to go back to his truck and leave this place behind. Behind him, the driver's door of the sedan clicked. Just once. The sound of a latch releasing. He turned. The door hung open a fraction, just enough to show a slice of darkness inside. No dome light came on. The feeling that rushed over him wasn't the sudden, sharp fear of jump scares or sudden noises. It was a deep, low thing, like standing too close to the edge of something very tall and realizing there was nothing between you and the drop but the air. Something moved in the driver's seat. Not a shape exactly, more like a thinning of the dark, a slight rearrangement of shadow. Then a voice, quiet and hoarse from disuse, slipped out into the night. Jordan. It was not his co-driver's voice. It wasn't anyone he recognized at all, a stranger's tone, shaped around his name like it had practiced. Every muscle in his body went tight. He swallowed. "Yes," he said, because there was no point pretending otherwise. "You didn't stop last time," the voice said. There was no accusation in it, just a statement. "You kept going. You had to. They told you. But you still didn't stop." He thought of the fog, of the lines of vehicles, of the way he'd been waved on after giving his statement so the road could be cleared, of how he'd driven on, hands numb on the wheel, not wanting to look in the mirrors because he knew what he'd see, flashing lights receding, some of them for people who would not get to go home. "I wanted to," he said. "There wasn't anything I could do. They had it handled." Silence stretched. The trees nearby shifted a little, leaves whispering to each other. "You still kept going," the voice repeated softly. He let the truth of that settle. "Yes," he said. "I did. I still do. I don't know what else to do but keep going." Something like a sigh came from the car. Not tired, not angry, just old. "You see a lot from up there," it said. "The things after. things just before. We don't. We just end. Then the road keeps moving without us. Jordan felt a flicker of something like sorrow. "I'm sorry," he said, the words feeling inadequate, and yet the only ones that fit. "For what happened to you, for what happened to him." He paused, throat tight. "For driving away. Even if I had to. I'm still sorry." The air in front of him seemed to thicken, as if the night was listening. Inside the car, the shadows shifted again. "You remember us," the voice said. "That's more than some." He thought of all the drivers who passed the memorial markers and never knew the names on them. Of the way his own mind had tried to fold that night into something smaller, easier to tuck away. "I do," he said. "I remember more than I want to most nights." A faint creak came from the door as it opened another inch. For a moment, he thought he saw someone sitting there. Not clearly, not a face he could describe. Just the suggestion of a body bending forward, hands resting on a steering wheel, head turned slightly his way. It made no move to get out, no attempt to reach him. "I keep seeing you," Jordan said, his voice softer now. "In my mirror, state to state, mile after mile. If you're following me, I don't know what you want." The answer came without hesitation. "We're not following you," the voice said. "We're making sure you don't stop where we did." The words settled into him like a stone dropped into deep water. A memory flashed the car behind him on the interstate, never getting closer, never dropping back, just there. Not crowding, not pushing. Just existing at exactly the distance that meant, if he drifted, if he lost focus, if something in front of him forced a sudden change, he'd have a margin. He'd live in the gap. Another sound came then, from farther along the overlook. The low rumble of another truck pulling in, tires crunching as it took one of the other slots. Headlights swept briefly across them, harsh and white. In that sudden wash, the teal sedan looked empty. Dust lightly coated the dashboard. A spiderweb gleamed for a second in a corner of the windshield. The seat covers were torn. No one sat behind the wheel. Jordan blinked, heart pounding in the space of that instant. Then the other truck passed, its beams moving on, leaving the rest area in its dimmer light again. The sedan door was closed. Jordan's breath came out in a slow exhale. He stood there for another few seconds, listening to the new truck parking, the faint clank of its trailer settling, the muffled thud of a door closing. The air around the sedan felt different now, lighter, as if some pressure had eased. He reached out and brushed his fingers lightly against the cool metal of the driver's door. "Thank you," he said quietly. The car did not answer. It just sat there, a faded piece of someone's life that had ended a long time ago. Parked at the edge of a view few people saw in daylight, Jordan walked back to his truck. He climbed into the cab, shut the door, and sat for a minute with his hands on the wheel, feeling the thump of his own pulse in his fingers. Through the windshield, he could see the faint line of the valley below, trees and distant houses reduced to shapes and dots. The other truck idled softly nearby, a human shadow moving behind its curtain. He checked his mirrors one last time before pulling the curtain on his sleeper. The teal sedan was still there, where he'd left it. Just a car. No headlights glowed behind his trailer. No uneven beams hung at the edge of his vision. That night, he slept more deeply than he expected. In the months that followed, he watched his mirrors with the same vigilance. But the persistent dread was gone. The road was no safer than it had been. Drivers still made mistakes, weather still surprised, machines still failed. But he felt accompanied, in a way that didn't crowd his thoughts. Every once in a while, on a long, lonely stretch of highway when the moon was low and the white lines blurred, he'd see a pair of uneven headlights in the distance. Sometimes they'd be behind another truck, holding that same careful distance. Sometimes they'd appear in his mirror for a handful of miles, then fade back, disappearing at an exit he couldn't quite see. He no longer tried to outrun them. He acknowledged them with small, practical gestures, an extra check of his speed, a wider margin around the vehicles ahead, a decision to pull off before he pushed himself too far. On a spring morning almost a year later, he stopped at a rest area in a different state and noticed a small plaque near the entrance he'd never paid attention to before. In memory of those lost in the pileup of May 12, thank you to the drivers who continue on. He stood there for a while looking at it, the hum of idling engines behind him, the murmur of travelers moving in and out of the building. He thought of the teal car, of Alex, of the ghost of guilt that had ridden with him for so long it felt like part of his gear. The plaque didn't lighten any of that in a dramatic way. It didn't give him absolution, but it made something in him unclench, just a little. That night, back on the road, the sky clear and full of stars, he glanced in the mirror at a set of headlights pacing him. They were even this time, perfectly aligned. Just another car. He smiled faintly to himself and drove on, knowing that somewhere, out past the reach of his own beams and thoughts, some stretches of asphalt kept more company than they let on, and that every mile he made now carried with it all the others who hadn't made theirs. The road would always have shadows. Not all of them were there to knock him off course.